Towering green mountains loom in the distance, but one colossal structure dominates the landscape. This is Valhalla, one of the 4 legendary hunter training academies. In a sea of aspiring warriors stand, weapons in hand. Every year, countless hopefuls try to enter this prestigious fortress. The trials leave behind a literal mountain of defeated applicants. The admission rate is a brutal 500 to 1. Only the strongest few survive the ordeal. From that number, less than 150 will ever graduate from Valhalla. The moment the briefing ends, the entrance exam explodes into chaos. A kick is thrown, only to be blocked by a desperate parry. Elsewhere, other applicants furiously practice their skills inside training pods. Watching over this crucible from a transparent window, one man observes everything with a sharp, intelligent gaze. This is the senior instructor of Valhalla Academy, a man named Lee Sinal. From his side, a voice speaks. Quite the promising batch this year. Lee turns to see a young man in an immaculate suit approaching him. This was the heir of the powerful Yashan family, Wu Manjun. Lee's face remained stern. There will certainly be more to see. He then asked, surely you didn't come all this way just to watch? Or are you here for your niece? Manjun leaned against the railing, gazing down at the chaos. The Yashan family has high expectations for our Soyan. Lee looked forward as Manjun softly gave orders to his men. The instructor's mind immediately went to the girl's file. A young student with striking purple hair and eyes to match. A true genius, born into one of the top 5 families. She had mastered mana to a degree comparable to seasoned veterans by the tender age of 10. Even then, her skill with a blade was already deadly. She could have challenged her own mother at 13. By the time she was 16, she had surpassed all her relatives, leaving them defeated in her wake. No one in her generation could match her. Lee looked ahead, recalling the astonishing details in her file. He turned to Manjun. Is there any other information I should be aware of? Manjun gave a slight, confident sigh. There are whispers that Soyan can communicate directly with our family's guardian constellation. Lee was stunned. That single piece of information changed everything. Manjun smiled. It's true, and that is precisely why we expect so much from her. As he spoke, a celestial light seemed to fill the air. The reason there were 5 great families in Korea was because of the divine beings bound to their bloodlines. The guardian constellations. Unknown entities wreathed in overwhelming power. A normal hunter might receive a blessing or form a contract with a constellation. But the guardians of the 5 families were on an entirely different plane of existence. A man holding a divine katana. This was the sword god of the Yashan family. He was followed by a warrior wielding a radiant purple spear, the holy spear of the Jan family. Then, a half-naked giant with a crimson blade, the Blade King of the Cho family. Next, a man whose fists alone could shatter mountains, the Fist King of the An family. And finally, a cloaked figure drawing a bowstring of pure energy, the Bow God of the Du family. 5 divine silhouettes stood side by side, all members of the 5 families. Were blessed by these patrons, granting them talent and abilities far beyond normal humans. Lee stood listening, processing the weight of Manjun's words. There was a vast chasm between receiving a simple blessing and communicating directly. That meant she had a true pact with her guardian. He clasped his hands, staring intently. If that's true, then she is more than just a genius. Manjun smirked, raising a finger. I completely agree. He leaned casually against the railing. So, how is my monster of a niece doing? Lee glanced at a monitor. She has not begun her test yet. It will commence in 30 seconds. Manjun's smile widened. Excellent. May I watch? Lee gestured towards the stands below. If you wish, you can go down to the viewing area. Down below, a horde of reporters and spectators were filming the event. Manjun scoffed. And you want me to go through all of them? He looked down disdainfully. Just display the feed on the main screen. Instructor. Lee's eye twitched slightly at the command. But then, his own professional curiosity took over. Very well, he conceded. I admit, I am also quite interested to see this for myself. He raised his hand, summoning a holographic system panel, and with a few quick taps, a blue screen flickered to life. Focused solely on Soyan, she stood before her opponent, her hand reaching for her weapon as Minjun watched intently from the sidelines. It's already started, he murmured. On one side, Yoon Seo-yeon, the 17-year-old prodigy of the Yashan family. On the other, a nobody from an unknown clan, Kim Ju-hyuk. Hyak Lee stood beside Minjun, remarking, They seem awfully calm. Minjun's eyes narrowed in analysis. He's already given up, Minjun declared. He knows his opponent is in a different league entirely. That's not calm, it's resignation. Seo-yeon glared with fierce determination. Yet Ju-hyuk merely stood there, completely unfazed. Suddenly, he let out a massive yawn. Lee scoffed. That kid has 0 fighting spirit. Minjun simply smiled. I'm sure this will be over in an instant, he said, his voice low. In the arena, The countdown for the duel began. The moment it hit 0, Seoyeon exploded into action, her sword already drawn. A torrent of mana surged into her blade, causing it to erupt in an ethereal blue light. With a mighty swing, she unleashed a wave of pure energy straight at her foe. Lee watched in awe. To wield mana with such mastery at her age? She's a true genius. Her control was flawless, her technique exceptional. The guy just stood there, watching the destructive trail of mana hurtle toward him. The parasitic mark on his stomach pulsed faintly. He simply smirked and took the blast head-on. Lee's confident expression shattered into one of pure horror. Minjin froze, his eyes wide. The entire stadium fell silent in disbelief. When the dust settled, Juhyuk stood with his fist crackling with immense power, while Soyeon, the prodigy, lay unconscious on the floor. The victory belonged to Kim Juhyuk. He clenched his fist, a flicker of annoyance in his eyes. He couldn't understand it. Why is everyone so weak? He muttered. This couldn't possibly be the future. 300 years after the cataclysm, the scene flashes back 3 centuries. Within the glowing tower of reflection, a final battle had reached its climax. 2 figures stood opposite each other, both battered and broken. A man with white hair and a mask coughed up blood, a grim laugh escaping his lips. Now that was a magnificent fight, he rasped. A voice echoed through the crumbling chamber. The tower is collapsing, the god of destruction, Barak. He was facing the hero of humanity, covered in mortal wounds. It was the martial god, Kim Hyeno. With the last of his strength, Hyeno raised his leg for one final attack against the god of destruction. Be gone, he roared, unleashing a kick with such devastating force that Barak's head was sent flying from his shoulders. As the body of a god fell to the floor, Hyeno turned away. A translucent panel appeared before him. The system declared his victory. He had defeated the final boss of the Tower of Destruction. The world's end had been averted. Just then, a violent earthquake shook the tower to its core, and it began to fall apart. Hyeno collapsed, clutching the wound that was bleeding profusely. He looked around in a daze. He figured the dungeon was collapsing now that the boss had been slain. He struggled to his feet through the overwhelming pain, glancing at his fatal wound one last time. His hand fell away from it. Finally, he whispered, I can get some rest. Since he was a child, his entire life had been dedicated to being a hunter. Just when he had finally earned wealth and recognition, this calamity had occurred. Walking towards a distant light, he wondered if he should have brought his students with him. But he immediately dismissed the thought. He glanced at Barak's body. The monster's power had been too immense. His students would have only died a meaningless death. He closed his eyes and gave a weary smile. How awful, he breathed. In the next moment, a giant rock fell from the ceiling, crushing him completely. And then, he snapped his eyes open. He shot up from a bed in a panic, staring at his hands, at his body. He couldn't believe it. He was Kim Hyeno, but trapped in the body of a 17-year-old boy. 300 years after the Tower of Destruction had fallen. He closed his eyes again, a slow smile spreading across his face, a second chance at life. He was more than satisfied. This new body was weak, but his knowledge, his lifetime of battle as the god of martial arts, remained perfectly intact. He opened a system panel. With his experience, adapting to this new era would be simple. He believed he could finally live a life of luxury and peace. That is, until a new, semi-transparent window appeared before his eyes. It read, In 5 years, the Tower of Destruction will reappear. Prepare yourself. Kim's face twisted in pure rage. He gripped his hair, his teeth grinding. Does God himself hold a personal grudge against me? He roared in his mind. He stared at the system window. That fiend, Barak. He should be dead for good. But there was nothing to be done. He opened his eyes again, his fury hardening into cold resolve as he stared at the system window once more. He realized his path was set. Fine, he vowed. This time, I'll destroy that tower once and for all, and then I will have my peace. After indulging in the luxury of wine and coin, he rose and prepared himself. Looking forward, another system. Window materialized before his eyes. It read, Please return your weapons and memories on the 3rd floor. 5 rooms to the right of Valhalla. Kim was baffled. Return weapons and memories. Valhalla, the Constellation room. The terms were a complete mystery. He stood before the system window, deep in thought. Placing a hand on his chin, he murmured. He finally understood the part about a gunsmith with memories. But what to do next was still a blank. He decided, I must first find this place called Valhalla. In the next instant, the world warped around them, depositing them before the colossal Valhalla building. The 4th day of the competition was about to begin. An announcement urged all participants to head to the site. Kim was already in uniform, sitting calmly on a bench. He stared ahead, wondering if he should even bother. A moment later, he was on the field, standing before a man with heavily bandaged hands. The official overseeing the match ordered the opponents to take their places. The crowd roared, their phones capturing every moment of the spectacle. Lee clasped his hands together, observing. There are more people here today than ever before. It was because the children of all 5 great families were gathered here. He looked to the side, his thoughts drifting to Kim. He announced that this upstart was pitted against the eldest son of the Awen family, Oak, a prodigy renowned for 17 years. Sanok stared back with a deadly serious face and confirmed, "So this is the one who defeated Yuan in a single day." Kim stood calmly, loosening his body, his eyes fixed on his opponent. Sanok sized him up. "He doesn't look so tough," he thought with a smirk. He then covered his head and closed his eyes, thinking, "This is good. If I can crush him, my image will soar." He then called out to Kim, "Your end is coming." With that, the countdown began. Kim glanced at him and asked what that meant. Senek's face was like stone as he replied, "It means I'm going to destroy you swiftly." Kim met his glare with a confident smile. "Is that so? In that case?" "What is it?" Sanok demanded. Kim pointed at him with a smirk and said, "Get out of here." He threw the insult just as the match began. We see the eldest son of the Awen family, Oak, sleeves rolled up, practically blazing with raw power. He glanced away. He was no master of literature, strategy, or even refined martial arts. However, he possessed one singular talent that was superior to everyone else's. He flexed his arm, and the sheer muscle tore his shirt to shreds. His talent was his peerless physique. He was a monster of strength, capable of impossible things. He could achieve with raw power what others needed mana to do. He had honed this gift through brutal training, lifting massive dumbbells. He practiced his punches on solid walls, and after countless hours of training, his strength only continued to climb higher and higher. He was born with a top-level constitution, worthy of being called a genius for that alone. He was absolutely confident in himself. So he stared back at Kim, who just told him to get out of here, to Sanok. This was an unforgivable slight. His face twisted with rage as he clenched his fist, preparing to attack. He instantly exploded towards Kim, swinging a powerful arm. But Kim remained perfectly still, merely pointing at him. Then, he lowered his finger, a thoughtful look on his face. He realized that with the body he was born in, he would be unable to win. A direct clash of physiques with Sanok. The man's strength was no empty boast. As the enraged behemoth charged in his direction, Kim thought, "Just because you surpass me in physique doesn't mean you can defeat me." Sanok launched a devastating punch, but Kim bent down with a calm face, letting the fist crater the wall behind him. Kim glanced at his own hand, noting how his martial arts were perfectly supporting the body he now inhabited. Then he lifted his leg and, with his eyes still closed, effortlessly delivered a kick that sent Sanok stumbling. The brute looked down in complete surprise as he fell to the ground. Kim opened one eye slightly and ready to palm strike. With a confident smile, he said, "My ability is observation." He then slammed a devastating blow into Sanok's torso. The impact was so powerful that a shockwave seemed to ripple through Sanok's very core. He blacked out from the sheer force of the blow, coughing and groaning. He then collapsed in front of Kim, who looked down on him. This is what happens when power isn't harmonized with technique. The winner was Kim Juk. Kim stared ahead, thinking, although this body is weaker than before my rebirth, there shouldn't be any problems hunting monsters. With that, he headed for the exit, while his opponent lay unconscious on the ground. A crowd of people watched on the large screen. Many were displeased and shocked that Sanok was so utterly defeated. A man began to write something down in a notebook and said, "I never expected he would just go on the attack." Behind him, a man raised a hand to his chin in thought. It was the head of the Awen family, the king of fisticuffs, Bao Chilin, who had just watched his son's humiliating defeat and couldn't fathom why people called that a normal attack. He gazed forward, musing that even his own son, who had zero interest in martial arts beyond basic fitness, could have dodged that clumsy fist, let alone a supposed expert. But this was a punch that was simply impossible to evade. He replayed the battle in his mind, realizing his composure had shattered. He'd attacked Kim fueled by pure rage, even using magic. He rarely unleashed, just to end it quickly. Yet Kim simply ducked his head, dodging the blow flawlessly. The man knew something was off. The attack completely shifted his center of gravity, allowing Kim to topple him. With a single light footstep and a finishing punch, he stood, lost in thought, the terrifying truth dawning on him. That young man, he was moving faster than the limits of human speed. The elder realized that from the very beginning. The boy had a plan. A smile crept across his face, his fist clenching with excitement. "What monstrous talent!" he whispered. His thoughts were shattered by the chatter of nearby journalists. They were buzzing about some outstanding newcomer. The man looked ahead, a name forming on his lips. Kim Ji-hak. He saw system images of Kim's location, his eyes glinting. He vowed to welcome that boy into their family, no matter the cost. After that, we're transported to a massive stadium, packed with roaring fans, all chanting for their idol, Choi Aram. They screamed her name, their support shaking the arena. Across the field stood Kim, facing a girl with striking blue hair. He looked away, utterly disgusted. "Why are grown men, who've served in the army, calling a 17-year-old girl Nuna?" he muttered. He turned back with a calm expression. This was it. The final match. Kim Ji-hak versus Choi Aram. She was the second daughter of the legendary Choi family. She took her stance. And the match began. She reached for her weapon, while Kim just stood there, watching quietly. For a moment, they just stared at each other. Kim considered the situation. He figured she was waiting for him to make the first move. He watched the girl, crouched and ready to strike with her sword. If she was at least trying to size him up, she was already a cut above the rest. A small smile played on his lips as he asked, "Should I get this over with?" He finally began to walk slowly towards her, his hands casually tucked in his pockets. He approached her with that same confident smirk. Her sword arm began to glow, crackling with raw mana and flashing with lightning. The media and fans erupted in shock. They couldn't believe a 17-year-old girl had already mastered the Choi family's signature ability. This year, only 5 children from the 5 great families were in attendance. Kim continued his calm stroll towards her. Her weapon pulsed with power. Her eyes glittered. This was her chance to attack. With a battle cry, she lunged, unleashing a blinding series of horizontal lightning strikes toward Kim. But amid the flash, Kim's body became a mere silhouette, and then vanished. When the lightning cleared, she stared in confusion, wondering where he'd gone. A voice echoed from the side. "If you show me your attack with your own eyes before you even launch it, dodging becomes trivially easy." The girl looked ahead, completely missing Kim standing off to the side, his aura now dominating the entire arena, warping the very air around him. She whirled around in surprise, unable to comprehend what was happening. In that instant, a devastating blow landed. The girl desperately tried. To block it, Kim's eyes widened slightly in surprise at the sword she held up for protection. He knew immediately. She'd used a defensive artifact to absorb the impact. The girl stood trembling, staring at her sword. "It's so heavy," she stammered. Kim walked over to her and slowly pressed his fist against the artifact. The girl could only stare, not understanding his intent. Then, Kim whispered a single command. "Return!" Instantly, a shockwave erupted, coursing through the girl's entire body and exiting out her back. Choi never expected such a bizarre and powerful technique. She began to choke, her body failing her. Kim stood with his hand outstretched, calmly watching as Choi collapsed to the ground, utterly exhausted. She lay there, trying to process what had just happened. She finally understood. It wasn't just a rumor. This guy's power was on a completely different level. Her mind went blank. With the match decided, Kim turned away, declared the winner. Next, a system bulletin board appears. The top 10 students of Valhalla are ranked. And at the very top, in first place, is Kim Ji-hak. We then see Kim walking out of Valhalla's gates, flexing his arm with his eyes closed. A second later, he's swarmed by a mob of cameramen and reporters. They begged for his attention, desperately trying to recruit him for their guilds and businesses. Some shouted promises, swearing to give him the best conditions imaginable if he would just join them. They pleaded and shoved, their desperation, finally making Kim snap. He exploded in anger, telling them all exactly what he thought. Soon after, an internet article appears. The headline reads, "Is Kim Ji-hak a crazy psychopath?" Below it was a picture of Kim, poking reporters away with his fingers, his face a mask. Of pure annoyance. The article continued. Is it true that right after taking first place, he chased, waving off the guides who offered him deals, spitting curses like he owned the place? Was he insane? The crowd certainly thought so. People whispered that he was going too far, especially with children around. They called him arrogant, unbelievably rude, but for a mere rookie, his fury was on another level. Someone commented that to enter Valhalla, he must have some serious connections. Another scoffed. After crushing 5 great families, who would dare reject him? With a character like that, he'd be tolerated anywhere. The scene shifts to Valhalla's grand hall, packed with people. Everyone stood, gazes fixed forward, smiling as they listened to the welcoming speech. They were being congratulated for making it into Valhalla. But Kim just covered his mouth and yawned, completely unimpressed. A proud 100-year history. To him, it was just mind-numbingly boring. He let his thoughts drift and his gaze wander. That's when he noticed him a guy in the back, watching his every move. Kim met his gaze, and the stranger quickly snapped his head away. Kim stared, a smirk playing on his lips. For someone trying to be stealthy, he was way too obvious. Later, we see Kim strolling through the halls when a system panel blazes to life before him. A message appeared. Please return your weapons and memories on the 3rd floor, room 5 to the right. Kim was baffled. What weapons was it talking about? And what in the world were flying constellations? The scene changes to a clear blue sky and lush green trees. Kim stared ahead, thinking this was supposed to be simple. Just get in, get out, no complications. He muttered that he was starting to understand something as the entrance ceremony finally dragged to a close. A sign hangs overhead, Virtual Battle Simulation Room. A man with white hair stood waiting, holding a sign. He glanced to the side, wondering what was wrong with the class. Assignments? This was Kim Lagoon, a Valhalla instructor and the former head of the Cheon Guild. He looked ahead and saw Yoan of the Yashan family, with Aaron of the Chonying family beside her. The instructor scanned. The crowd and their eyes landed on Senok from the Awan family. A palpable fear surrounded him. A terrifying, malevolent aura radiated from his body, making everyone nearby tremble. The instructor was completely shocked. He ran a hand through his hair, realizing the random class assignments were a disaster. He couldn't believe it. 3 of the 5 great families, all in the first-year class. Then his eyes widened as he looked to the side. He saw the same rookie who took first place in the tournament. The instructor clutched his head, his mind reeling. Why was he in this class too? He felt like fate was playing a cruel joke on him. He clenched his fist, shut his eyes, and took a deep breath. He had to stay calm and handle this decisively. Composing himself, he cleared his throat and stepped forward with an air of confidence. A pleasure to meet you all. He pointed to his forehead. I am the one in charge of this class. And I am your instructor, Kim Lagoon. With an intimidating glare, he slammed a button on a console. Instantly, the world began to warp. The students gasped, looking around in utter confusion. The space around them twisted and reformed, and in a blink, they were standing in a dense forest. Panic erupted. Just a moment ago, they were in a classroom. Kim, however, simply scanned his new surroundings with a calm expression. The instructor smirked, drawing his blade with a sharp ring of steel. Time to show you rookies a little blood. From the shadows, massive trolls wielding crude clubs began to emerge. The students screamed, finding themselves trapped in a ring of monsters. Senok, however, remained unfazed, calmly assessing the threat. Orcs and goblins, about 100 of them. The goblins stared at the terrified students, drool dripping from their jaws, before charging forward. One leaped directly at Senok, only to slam into an invisible blue barrier, suspended in midair. The instructor smiled smugly. The barrier was holding perfectly. The goblin shrieked, clawing at the shield, but its efforts were useless. Suddenly, someone called out Kim's name. The rookie turned around. The instructor gestured for him to approach. Kim walked over as the instructor pointed a thumb at the horde of monsters. Think you can handle all these monsters by yourself? He asked, a challenging glint in his eye. Kim glanced at the creatures calmly. You mean these things running around? He asked dismissively. Lagoon nodded, and Kim looked down, a thoughtful expression on his face. A confident smile spread across Lagoon's face. He was certain this would finally knock that rookie's ego down a peg. He thought about the other students. Most of them had only ever seen monsters in textbooks. They had never faced one in person. It was only natural that they were paralyzed with fear. With a sly smile, he dared Kim to stop pretending. Lian just needed him to refuse. So the real lesson could begin. But when Kim's ego flared, a vicious grin spread across his face, and Lian's expression froze. He stared at Kim, who simply laughed. Kim assumed he was expected to handle this little problem himself. Of course, Kim declared. I can handle them easily. Lian scoffed, certain the boy was still bluffing. So he challenged him. Then prove it. Kim rose, hands casually in his pockets, and remarked that this was an unusual test for day 1. An unscheduled test like this, he mused, usually comes with some kind of reward, doesn't it? Lian looked down, silently admitting the boy was right. Kim had seen right through him. Kim's eyes glinted. If I take care of every single monster here, you'll owe me. Annoyed, Lian made a bold declaration. Fine, if you clear them all, I'll grant you anything within my power. Kim stroked his chin thoughtfully. It's not much, he said with a sigh, but I accept your terms. He stood before Lian, hand outstretched for a deal, but the instructor sneered, convinced Kim didn't grasp the danger. A monster in this system, Lian warned, feels just as real as one in the outside world. Kim was unfazed. Just give me a sword. He glanced at the snarling goblins. How am I supposed to fight without a weapon? Did you really expect me to take them on with my bare hands? Lian stared back calmly, then reached behind him. He retrieved a sword and placed it in Kim's hands. Use this, he said. Kim examined the blade with a satisfied smile. He slung it over his back and faced the horde. At that moment, the protective barrier around them shattered. The goblin's eyes lit up with bloodlust. Liang watched intently, his face unreadable. The other students held their breath. Kim began to draw his blade, and with a piercing gaze and a vicious smile, he unleashed a single, vertical strike that tore through countless goblins in an instant. His intimidating aura exploded. He was immediately swarmed by 4 hulking trolls, their eyes burning with killing intent. But Kim felt no fear. He instantly brandished his sword, ready to cut them all down. As they tried to flank him, he pivoted with expert grace, swinging his sword in a devastating arc. The incredible force of the blow shook the very ground beneath him, but Kim's stance remained unbroken. A wild roar escaped his lips as he moved without hesitation, his sharp blade a blur of motion. A heart-rending cry echoed. He had plunged his sword straight through the last troll's throat, ending the battle. Kim was almost surprised himself. After 300 years, his first time holding a sword again. And it wasn't half bad. The fight triggered a flood of memories, of his childhood, surrounded by monsters in a world that couldn't protect itself. He had to use any weapon he could find across the desolate earth. Sometimes it was a simple rake, a hoe, or even a shovel. But nothing ever compared to the feeling of his own sharp sword. Lost in thought, Kim let his guard down for a moment. Behind him, a surviving troll raised its axe for a final blow. But without a second thought, Kim's instincts took over. He dodged, narrowly avoiding the strike. The troll's axe slammed into the ground with a deafening crash that pierced his ears. Kim sneered to himself. The monster's movements were completely predictable. Nothing more than a scripted NPC. As Kim finished off the last straggler, 2 figures watched from the shadows, unable to believe what they were seeing. Lian noted that the sword he'd given Kim was utterly ordinary, with no magical properties at all. Yet the way Kim wielded it was simply unbelievable. It was as if his blade was a vortex, sucking the monsters in, giving them no chance to resist, and granting him an effortless victory. Soan clenched her fists, while Senek watched the madness, utterly speechless. Erin just nervously clutched her collar. Standing atop a mountain of corpses, Kim was the picture of absolute confidence, sheathing his sword and closing his eyes. He was one step closer to his goal. He turned around, his eyes locking onto Lian. "You're going to keep your promise, right?" he asked. The instructor was stunned into silence, lost in thought. But then, a sound broke the tension. Lian announced that class was over. "Everyone must be tired," he declared. "Go to your dorms and get some rest." As the students began to leave, cleaning up the training areas, Kim had already fallen asleep at his desk, having completely ignored Lian's dismissal. When he finally woke up, he was bewildered. Why did the class drag on so long? All he wanted was to claim his reward and get out of there. Once outside, he couldn't grasp it. How could he teach when he'd never even set foot in a school before? As Kim approached the house, his mind raced, trying to piece everything together. The stories about the constellations, they stuck with him the most. In his past life, such beings never existed. It was a concept so foreign, so powerful, it demanded his constant attention. The term constellation was reserved for mortals who achieved godhood through immense power. They carried themselves with an air of absolute authority, their names forever linked to the hunters they chose. They were patrons, bestowing holy relics and unimaginable power from the heavens. A weapon from a constellation could elevate a hunter to a legendary status, separating them from the rest. And here in Korea, Valhalla itself was the world's 3rd largest relic of the constellations. This was the true source of power in this world. Everything he knew about swordsmanship, about slaying monsters, it was all meaningless here. A sharp pain shot through his collarbone, a grim reminder of his body's limits. He needed to practice, to build his strength. But his vessel was still so fragile, lost in thought. Kim looked up, startled to find Erin standing directly in his path. Meanwhile, in the faculty office, Sanol and Lian discussed matters over steaming coffee. Sanol remarked that Lian had been through a lot, but Lian simply scoffed, calling it an embarrassment, not a hardship. Leaning back in his chair, he admitted that in hindsight, nothing made sense anymore. Both of them were completely floored by Kim's unbelievable performance. The virtual test spawned 120 monsters, and he annihilated every single one. How could a young, unknown high schooler single-handedly defeat A horde of 120 trolls, Leon's wild theory was starting to feel like an undeniable truth. Finishing his coffee, Sunol admitted he saw nothing special about Kim, disagreeing with his colleague entirely. He pointed out Kim's background, an orphan from a small institution in a notoriously dangerous district. This revelation stunned Leon. His mind immediately jumped to one conclusion: Kim had to be a forger, a fake. But as he raised his cup, Leon dismissed his own suspicion. His personal investigation proved otherwise. A simple forger wouldn't have the audacity to waltz into Valhalla and cause a scene at the opening ceremony. Then came the true shocker. Leon glanced back, asking if Sunol knew that Kim himself had requested permission to enter the Constellations room. The answer was clear. Leon looked down, realizing the boy's ambition knew no bounds. Kim was destined to get what he wanted, and Leon was grateful he'd helped him secure a ground floor pass. After a sip of coffee, he made a stern declaration he was taking full responsibility for the boy. Leaning against the wall, Leon confessed he knew little about the restricted area on the 5th floor, but the 1st floor was open to anyone. Getting inside would be the easy part. Leon slumped in his chair, a deep unease settling in. He worried about what the coming year would bring. He crossed his arms, admitting his anxiety was indeed connected to Kim. As if that wasn't enough, his class also contained 3 students from the legendary 5 families. Controlling even one was a nightmare. As his voice rose in frustration, his colleague tried to placate him, mentioning an exchange student from the Ventric family in another class. Still agitated, Leanne's voice trembled. "You don't mean, you're not talking about that Windrunner?" They both stood in a haze of troubled thoughts, confirming their shared dread. It was indeed a direct descendant of the Ventric clan, the infamous Rockle Ventric. A frown creased his face. He remembered the rumors about Rockle being expelled from the British Academy for fighting with his cousin. Hearing this, Leanne let out a long sigh. Suddenly, his own problems seemed far more manageable. The scene shifts back to Kim. Erin had followed him, her gaze fixed intently on his back. Without even turning, he asked flatly, "What is it?" Timid, yet filled with resolve, she shouted her request. "Please, teach me how to use the sword." After witnessing his battle with the trolls, she was utterly captivated. Erin stared at him, explaining it was the incredible swordsmanship he displayed that she wanted to learn. Kim simply closed his eyes and began cleaning his ear, casually dismissing her. "They'll teach you that here," he said. "But why won't you teach me?" she pressed. Kim turned his back on her completely. "Why should I?" he countered, then repeated his refusal. "I have no intention of teaching you." Staring straight ahead, he asked, "Is there anything else?" Then, with a final turn of his head, he declared, "I'm leaving, model, to teach her the basics." A flicker of annoyance crossed Kim's face. He repeated himself, his voice laced with ice. Turning to face her, he questioned if she was deaf. He warned her to stop clinging to him. With a final, dismissive glare, he made it clear he had no intention of being her teacher. She was to leave him alone. Her expression fell as Kim turned his back, disappearing with the fading light. And just like that, the scene shifted to the following day. Inside Valhalla, Kim sat stone-faced at his desk. Other students milled about the classroom, but he remained lost in his own world, staring into the distance. He slowly raised his hand, examining it. He knew this would be the case, but this physical vessel was in far worse shape than he'd anticipated. He glared at his own palm with disgust. In this state, he realized, any kind of martial arts training would be completely useless, without a shred of latent magical ability. Controlling mana was nearly impossible. He clenched his fist in frustration. This entire magic power problem could be solved, if only he could find that thing and build a core of mana within himself. But his concentration was suddenly shattered. A voice called out his name. Kim glanced up to see a smug-looking boy with blonde hair, trailed by a girl standing dutifully behind him. This was Rockle Ventry, of the main Ventry family line. The girl was his personal maid, Yuria Defix. Rockle stood before Kim's desk, radiating an air of arrogant superiority, his gaze filled with condescending amusement. Then, with a sneer, he demanded to know who Kim was, remarking that such ignorance was expected from an uneducated commoner. To not even recognize the legendary Ventry family name, Rockle introduced himself, deciding to be direct. He extended his hand, a sly grin playing on his lips, and asked a simple question. "Do you want to become stronger in most noble houses? It's difficult for those in the side branches to amass real power or wealth. The main bloodline always holds the advantage. But the Ventry family was different. Their constellation took the form of a terrifying, beak-masked figure. Its unsettling presence set them apart from all others. Normally, a family's guardian is an S-class entity, or higher, who chooses a single heir to bestow its protection and power upon. But the Ventry constellation broke that rule. It could form a contract with any family member, not just the designated heir. This was a unique system where the chosen one had no choice but to accept the contract. This unique arrangement gave the Ventry family immense influence across Europe. Any member bearing their name could be chosen as a contractor, regardless of their background or lineage. A member from a side branch could suddenly wield the same authority. As someone from the main bloodline, Rockel Ventry, who had long been kept in check by his family, now reveled in this power. It satisfied him completely, and it also made him unbearably arrogant. But recently, he'd caused a major incident at the British Academy. To Rockel's shock, they actually expelled him, banishing him from their grounds for good. Still, Rockel looked back on it and smirked. It was fine. This was far from over. Then, a figure began walking toward him. He turned his head and saw Felix, a smile spreading across his face. He always got what he wanted in the end. Even after being kicked out, he knew he was a Ventry. His family always had a way of putting him back on the right path. As he pictured the dark silhouette of a certain powerful figure, Rockel closed his eyes and grinned. But first, he had to take care of the main issue at hand. Reaching his hand toward Kim with a confident smile, he knew what he had to do. He needed to draw this nobody, the current center of attention, firmly to his side. Rockel's smile widened as he made his grand offer. If Kim would simply obey him, he would grant him an audience with the Ventry family's constellation. All the while, Yuria stood silently in the background, her gaze averted. Kim finally looked up at him, his expression unreadable. "Are you an idiot?" Rockel froze, his face a mask of disbelief. Fury flared in his eyes, and even Yuria tensed up. Rockel sputtered out another sentence, but Kim just stared back, unimpressed. "Do you take me for a fool?" He saw right through the arrogant noble. "You have zero actual interest in me. You just wanted to start showing off. From the very beginning, and now you're talking such nonsense. You really are an idiot." Rockel's expression twisted with rage. He seethed, grinding his teeth. "You're just a filthy brat." But before he could act, a commanding voice cut through the tension. "Rockel, return to your seat." Rockel hesitated, then spun around furiously. He shouted, "Who dares speak my full name so casually?" But his bravado died when he saw Instructor Lee standing in the classroom, arms crossed, watching him with a stern glare, with a serious face. The instructor spoke, his voice like ice. "This is not the British Academy. This is Valhalla. And no matter how powerful your family is, here you will obey the instructors." Rockel could only listen, his face burning with displeasure and humiliation. So this man was truly an instructor at Valhalla. Rock Cheol tisked in disgust, turning his back and storming off, while Kim simply watched the pathetic display. He paused at the door, not even glancing in Kim's direction, and snarled that they would meet again. Kim met his threat with a fake, confident and piercing gaze of his own. Later, as students poured out of Valhalla, Kim walked among them, lost in thought. He walked on, his mind racing. Today had been a complete waste. He hadn't learned any new skills, nor anything about the Constellation Room. Instead, he'd just gotten tangled up with an arrogant fool. Kim ran a hand through his hair. He'd finally pieced it together. The so-called guild guides were actually outsiders who had infiltrated the school. They were using students and instructors to spy on him. At that exact moment, Aaron was quietly tailing him. Hadn't he made his annoyance clear enough? Just then, Aaron called out to him. Kim turned to see her blocking his path. She stood before him, once again asking him to teach her the art of sphere control. A look of displeasure crossed Kim's face. "Wasn't last time enough for you?" he asked coldly. Meanwhile, inside a high-class dorm in Valhalla, a room filled with luxury. But its pristine condition was shattered in an instant. As a fist slammed down on a lamp, a stream of curses followed. It was Rock Chol, his face a mask of pure fury as he glared at a shattered vase. His rage intensified, thinking of Kim, that pathetic orphan. How dare that nobody look down on him? To humiliate him in front of everyone. He roared for Yuria, telling her to contact Des. He had someone who needed to be dealt with. Pacing the room, he sashed everything in his path, wanting to destroy anyone who came near him. He glared back at Yuri, demanding her attention. But all he got was her terrified gaze fixed on the floor. In the silence, he violently grabbed her collar, demanding an explanation. She could only wheeze in pain as he leaned in close. "Do you really still think you're the eldest daughter of a noble family?" he whispered with venom. Yuria was completely terrified. Shrouded in fear, she couldn't believe the words he was spitting at her. But he just kept screaming. "Should I just kick you out of the family?" he raged. She dared to let out a whimper of protest, but he only shoved her with all his strength, sending her crumbling to the floor in pain. After giving her one last evil glare, he gave his order. "Contact Des. There's someone who needs to be taken care of." Yuria could only sit on the floor, trembling. He continued his instructions. adding that the target was the son of the Rise family, a second-year student, and that Rockchiel himself demanded to see him. She could only listen humbly and accept his command. Meanwhile, back in Kim Jin-hyuk's room, he began to concentrate, gathering the faint internal mana within his body. With his hands folded, he fell into a deep meditation, lost in his thoughts as a faint blue aura flickered to life. Specks of his mana danced around the room. Finishing his session, Kim let out a heavy breath. A deep frustration washed over him. "This body is garbage," he muttered. It was simply too weak to handle real mana. He sat on the edge of his bed, steeped in frustration. Sometime later, as Kim was walking outside, he noticed he was being followed again. It was Aaron. Kim's face hardened with annoyance. He stopped dead in his tracks, and Aaron froze. He turned to face her. "Why the hell are you still following me?" he demanded. "We're already outside the dorms. How long are you going to keep this up?" Aaron met his gaze. "Teach me the art of sphere control," she stated plainly. Kim looked at her, exasperated. "Are you a parrot?" he asked dryly. "You just keep repeating the same thing." This girl was too annoying. He had to get rid of her. He decided to name an absurd price. 10 million won? Aaron's eyes widened. "That's the price for a single lesson," he said coolly. "Can you afford it?" Aaron looked down, lost in thought. Thinking he had finally won, Kim turned to leave. But then, Aaron calmly asked for his phone number. Confused, he handed over his phone. "Why do you need this?" he asked. She took the device without a word. "I'm sending you my number," she said, tapping away before handing his phone back. "It will be much easier for me to send you the money this way." Kim took his phone back, still puzzled. His surprise turned to pure shock as he looked at the screen. A transfer notification for 100 million won. "So," she asked, "will you teach me now?" He just smiled, let out a small laugh, and said no, immediately canceling the transfer. Back in his apartment, Kim's mind was reeling. A random student had just tried to send him 100 million won. He closed his eyes, thinking it through. He realized he could probably teach her something without giving up his real secrets. And that was a staggering amount of money. Even if it didn't matter in the grand scheme. Kim rose from his bed, a plan forming. It was just money. But right now, he needed it. With his pathetic mana reserves, he had to find other resources to get stronger, dressed for the mission. He laced his sneakers and stood. Grabbing his tools, he pulled up his hood, disappearing into the shadows. His objective was clear: find the secrets he had buried long ago. In the distance loomed the massive Valhalla building, a silent giant. Next to its sprawling stadium, Kim moved through the forest, his thoughts turning inward. Before enrolling in this academy, he had done his research, most of the notes hidden 300 years ago. Were long gone, turned to dust, but research suggested at least 4 could still exist here. Kim pressed onward, his focus unwavering. He knew the truth. More than likely, only 3 remained, and their location was deep within. The mountains of Valhalla, standing before the academy, his gaze fixed on the towering peak. He lowered his hood, his resolve hardening. He had to find them. With that thought, he began to concentrate, stretching his hands forward. The very ground began to glow. An ethereal blue light pulsed beneath him. Kim unleashed his mana, eyes closed in focus. He knew he could locate them, because they resonated with his unique mana signature. Even with the pitiful amount of mana he currently possessed, he could feel their call. Suddenly, a brilliant beacon of mana flared in his senses. He opened his eyes, a sharp glint within them. He'd found it. He moved to the spot radiating the azure energy and began to dig. But as he broke the earth, frustration crashed over him. This body was pathetically weak. If he'd known it would be this exhausting, he would have buried it somewhere much easier to access. Cursing under his breath, he muttered, "If not for the Tower of Destruction, I wouldn't be doing this now." But with the world on the brink, there was no place for his hidden wealth. So I created these notes to contain it all. He could only pray the contents were untouched. As dawn broke, Kim had carved a massive hole in the ground. Panting, he finally spoke. "I've found them. The legacy I buried in my past life." Standing within the pit, his eyes landed on the buried safe. Kim knelt, searching for the keyhole. He found it, but immediately knew a normal key would be useless. Extending his hands, he focused his remaining energy. He gathered the last of his mana into a sphere, forming a magical thread. From this thread, he skillfully crafted a phantom key. He guided it toward the lock, a perfect fit. With a click, the safe swung open, just as the sun crested the horizon. He leaped inside. Before him lay a breathtaking hoard, untold riches and gleaming gems. Kim surveyed it all, a satisfied smirk on his face. "My children, I hope you've been well." He gazed upon his treasure. Now, money is no longer an issue. All that remained was to find the notes. But then, his eyes widened in surprise. Lying amongst the gold were deep purple storage stones. He knelt down to pick one up. He recalled, "To preserve the notes, I poured immense magic into these." The day had finally come to reclaim that power. As he gripped the stone, it erupted with a torrent of mana. The energy surged into him, instantly replenishing every last drop of his reserves. A smile played on his lips. He expected nothing less from his creations. He could feel the power overflowing within him now. With his mana fully restored, he pocketed the stone. First things first, he thought. I should secure the remaining storage. He pondered for a moment. Should he leave the heavy gold bars and just take the lighter jewels? Later, back at Valhalla Academy, Kim was utterly drained. He collapsed into his chair, looking half dead. Staring at the ceiling, he groaned. I never thought I'd have to use those notes again. I must be a crazy fool. My muscles are screaming from just a little digging. Just then, his exhausted thoughts were interrupted. Aaron was there, crouched down beside his desk, and looking right at him. Kim saw her, clutching his aching shoulder. What do you want? Her gaze was intense. Teach me swordsmanship? Again, clenching his shoulder. Kim sighed. You really don't give up, do you? He studied her, his mind recalling the facts. Among the top 5 families he'd researched after his rebirth, the Choen family, which included Choi Aaron, were masters of the sword. So why did she need him? He asked her outright, You could learn everything you need from your own family. She shook her head firmly. I don't want to learn from them. I want to learn from you. Her eyes burned with conviction. I have never seen anyone who handles a sword better than you. Kim raised an eyebrow. What about your father, the hero of Choen? I'm sure he's a better swordsman than me. Aaron repeated softly. My father. Before she could continue, Leon entered the room, interrupting them. Kim, follow me to the staff room. Aaron rose to her full height as Kim questioned the summons. Why? Leanne met his gaze. It's about what you asked for last time. Are you still interested? A smile spread across Kim's face. He stood up. Of course. I'm on my way. As he walked past, Aaron reached out to stop him, but let her hand fall. Kim paused at the door. Be at the training ground at 6, midnight. Aaron watched Kim head towards the staff room, then called out, asking if there was an issue. Shaking her head with a bright smile, she simply said that a certain someone would definitely be coming. Kim arrived at the staff room, standing before Leanne, who eyed him from his seat. Kim stated he had a class soon. He wanted to make this quick. Leanne began, confirming that Kim's access to the Constellation room was approved. However, he was restricted to the basement level. Kim's eyes widened, surprised at the mention of a basement. Lynn stressed the point. Any floor other than the basement was strictly forbidden. With a knowing smile, Kim agreed and asked when he could go. Leanne replied that if his schedule was clear, he could enter that very night. A grin spread across Kim's face. He would go today. Leanne's expression turned serious as he processed this. It was unexpected. He thought Kim would surely protest, furious about being barred from the second floor. But since he agreed, they would proceed. Kim acknowledged the order, then turned and walked towards the exit as evening descended. Leanne escorted Kim to the location. Pointing ahead, he declared they had arrived. Before them stood a massive, imposing structure. Guards stood like statues at their posts, the entrance bound by heavy crimson chains and an arcane seal. Leanne announced that this was Valhalla Academy's greatest treasure, the Constellation room. Kim's eyes immediately began scanning the area. He glanced to one side, spotting guards. He looked to the other, and saw more guards. He sighed, telling Leanne that the security here was even tighter than the main gate. Leanne agreed, stating that this fortress demonstrated the sheer importance of the Constellation room. It was the very reason Valhalla was one of the 3 great academies. Kim gazed at the building, his mind racing. He realized it wasn't just the number of guards. The outer walls were layered with countless magical wards. Except for the single entrance, the entire structure was hermetically sealed by chains and enchantments. Kim then asked if he could pose a question. Leanne turned to him, waiting. Kim's question was pointed. How could someone reach the second floor? And if they did, would it be considered a crime? Leanne crossed his arms, his voice cold. It wouldn't just be a crime, it would mean immediate expulsion from the academy. But that was a secondary concern. The intruder would go mad long before they were ever expelled. Kim questioned what he meant by going mad. Leanne explained that the magic on the second floor was a raging, chaotic storm. Anyone who touched that power would feel their mind shatter, utterly losing their sanity. Kim repeated the words, "Go crazy," then smiled. He understood completely. Leon's senses went on high alert. Why would this kid ask such a thing, right here at the entrance? He briefly wondered if Kim truly intended to break in, but dismissed the idea. Surely, the top-ranked candidate wouldn't be so foolish. Leon stood behind Kim as the heavy gates began to grind open. He was certain that Kim understood the rules, that he knew his place at the academy. As Kim prepared to enter, Leon shouted a final warning. "You have 30 minutes. Get out before then." The guard pulled the door open for Kim, who turned back with a confident smirk. "I'll be back soon." Just then, a system panel flared into existence. "Retrieve your weapons and memories. Valhalla, 3rd floor, 5th room to the right." Kim stared at the message, his purpose hardening. Expulsion meant nothing. This was the very reason he came to Valhalla in the first place. His first mission reached the 3rd floor. He descended the winding stairs, the walls a maze of gears and pipes. He wondered just how deep this place went. There was no end in sight. Looking up, he couldn't tell where he was. He guessed it might be some kind of prison. Then he reconsidered. He was sure the Constellation room was on the 2nd floor. But perhaps its true secret was hidden here. He pressed onward, muttering that it didn't really matter. But then a thought gave him pause. Should he really be going deeper? Suddenly, he froze. A system window blazed to life before him. It declared that all conditions had been met. He was being transferred to another location. Kim stared, confused. What other room? Before he could react, his surroundings began to dissolve. An unfamiliar voice echoed in the void. "It has been a long time." "Kim Huno!" On high alert, Kim snapped his head forward. He saw a man dressed in a magnificent uniform. A blindfold covered his eyes, and horns curled from his head. Kim uttered a single, questioning name. "Bara." Bara smiled serenely. 300 years have passed. Is this not a long-awaited reunion? But before he could finish his sentence, a fist crashed into his face with pure fury in his eyes. Kim snarled that he was overjoyed to see this fool again. A bruise already forming? Bara held up his hands, pleading for Kim to wait. But another heavy blow was already flying toward him. "Die," Barch sneered. Yet Kim held out his hands, urging calm and a chance to talk. But his pleas were ignored. Another blow landed as Barch hissed, "Just die!" Kim begged him to stop, but the assault was relentless. The barrage continued. Barch promised it would only get worse. After a storm of punches, he loomed over his opponent. Barch lay completely battered. Kim simply closed his eyes, his breathing growing calm. He stated that he wasn't a man who relied on his fists. Barch stared blankly for a moment, then launched a vicious kick. "This is different," Kim roared, striking back with raw fury. "You ruined my comfortable future." "My wealth, my honor," he screamed with every blow, remembering the students he trained. "Stop," Barch pleaded. "Don't you wonder where we are?" Kim looked around the endless void. "What is this place?" he demanded, seeing absolutely nothing. Barch struggled to his feet. "This," he announced, "is an imaginary world." Kim scoffed. "What kind of imaginary world?" Correcting his form, Barch elaborated. "To be exact, this is a space within the relic. The one you see now," he continued, "is merely an incarnation. Your real body ceased to exist 300 years ago." The shock was paralyzing as Kim processed the impossible truth. He stood frozen, trying to comprehend everything he had just heard. "You've been in this relic the whole time," he asked. Barch confirmed it. And in that moment, the terrifying reality sank in. Spreading his arms wide, a brilliant yellow seal materialized behind Barch. "You understand everything correctly," he declared. "I have become a constellation." Kim could only stare ahead, dumbfounded, at the triumphant man before him. His shock twisted into pure rage. "What the hell is going on here?" he roared, his fists flying once more. Meanwhile, outside this space, Liang stood waiting, his path blocked by numerous guards. He watched the building in silence, until his eyes widened in surprise. Kim had walked out of the building. The guards immediately moved to inspect him. Kim strode over to Liang. "Did they do anything strange to you?" Kim simply held up a hand. "I just looked around. Any further, and I would have gone crazy." Liang observed him thoughtfully, then nodded. "I understand. Let's go home." Kim agreed and turned to leave. As he walked, his mind was trapped, replaying the unbelievable events that had just transpired. He remembered pointing his finger at Barch. "I don't care about you becoming a constellation," he had said. "Just answer my question. Did you create that transparent system notification?" "What is it?" Kim had demanded. The beaten Barch looked up, insisting he knew nothing. With a vicious roar, Kim grabbed him by the throat. Hoisting him into the air, he prepared to strike again. "You're a fool!" Barch swore he was telling the absolute truth. He explained that after Kim killed him, He spent 300 years trapped in this void without any energy. Kim paused, thinking. He released his grip. Then who created the notification? Barch looked down grimly. I also received one. He revealed the notification offered him a chance to contact the reincarnated Kim Hyak, and in doing so, regain all his lost memories. Kim listened, his mind racing. Reincarnations? Barch's gaze became distant. That's when that suspicious person appeared. He likely made me the owner of the tower. And of destruction. Who? Kim demanded. Who made you the tower's owner? Barch held up his hand helplessly. I don't know. All my memories of that part have simply disappeared. He explained. Barch didn't think the vanished memories would return all at once. He then looked at Kim. What is in your mind? Kim touched her chin, recalling the notification. It asked me to find a weapon, she said. But I couldn't calculate what was below, because it was censored by squares. Kim spread his arms wide. And I don't remember losing any memories. I still have all my memories of that tower. Barch's eyes lit up with a theory. Maybe you already remember everything. And maybe you've already found the weapon, so the memories appeared naturally. Kim stared in shock. Did you actually find the same weapon? Exactly, Barch confirmed. This space is the inner world of the 4 village weapons that became sacred relics. They are incredibly powerful, radiating a huge amount of mana. Barch then made his final confession. I became a constellation because I used the village sword as a relic. Fury began to boil inside Kim once more. His fists clenched, ready to destroy him all over again. Barch asked innocently, What's wrong with that? Kim exploded in a furious shout. You're a complete fool! Back on the street, his thoughts swirled. His village sword. A relic. And inside it, a constellation. He couldn't grasp the insanity of the situation at all. He held out his hand. Of course, he wanted to just destroy it and forget everything. But no matter how worn it was still holding back Barch, the man once called the King of Destruction. A moment later, the blue village sword appeared in his hand. He stared at the notification, a quest that was impossible for him to accept. It required the village sword, but Kim simply claimed he knew nothing about it. Suddenly, a voice called out to him. So you're Kim, the top-ranked rookie from the entrance ceremony? Before him stood a gang of upperclassmen, all cracking their knuckles. A guy with yellow hair stepped forward. He sneered, introducing himself as Lyric Sunrise, a second-year student and the eldest son of the powerful Sunrise family. Kim eyed him coolly. The eldest? Really? He mocked. A bully like you? One of the thugs began to advance, stretching his arms. Lyric scoffed. You're far too fearless. Just because you're number 1, he continued, doesn't mean you can disrespect your seniors. From the crowd, another thug holding a gun emerged, vowing to teach this fool a lesson. Lyric waved him on, telling him to go easy. The gunman started lecturing the newcomer about the immense power gap between first and second years. But before he could finish, a brutal kick slammed into his gut. Kim flashed a defiant grin. Enough talk, he challenged. Come at me, all at once. He then launched himself into the air, delivering a powerful 2-legged kick straight to the man's face. The sheer force of the blow sent the thug flying backward into the stunned crowd. They watched in shock as his body crashed hard against the wall. Lyric's face twisted into a vicious snarl. That crazy bastard, he spat. Then his eyes widened. He saw Kim holding a sword. Lyric was certain he hadn't been armed a moment ago. Kim gripped the hilt, a satisfied smile on his face. A perfect fit. It's been a while since I've had a decent warm-up. He gestured towards them with a wicked grin. So, are you going to attack? Kim's eyes gleamed with excitement. This is going to be a lot of fun. If you just stand there, I'll splatter your heads everywhere. The scene rewinds 3 hours. Lyric is in a lavish room, talking with a man who smilingly proposes a simple task. This man is Rockdion. Urea stood silently behind him. Rockdion, lounging on a sofa, explained he needed just one student taken care of. Lyric sat opposite him. Rockdion promised a handsome reward for his help. The Sunrise family will be in your debt. The target, he explained, was a freshman named Kim. Lyric listened intently as Rockdion laid out the plan. Use a gun, I don't care, he said, his eyes glinting with malice. Just clean up this mess for me. Do we have a deal? Lyric met his gaze calmly. Consider it done. He then turned and left the room. As the door closed, he paused. To him, it didn't matter if Kim was the top-ranked rookie. No freshman could ever be a match for a senior. The difference in their power was absolute. This gap was created by their contracts with the Constellations. In Valhalla, students must visit the Constellation room during their second semester to form a pact. Once they sign this contract, they become official contractors. Lyric walked on, a confident smirk playing on his lips. Contractors could wield the immense power of their patrons, and a freshman with no special background. She wouldn't even have a guardian constellation. Lyric's smile turned sinister. He was certain he could crush Kim easily, or so he thought, until he faced him in the flesh. Kim's sword flashed, striking a thug on the leg. A blinding light erupted from the impact. A red-haired goon drew a knife. Screaming, "You fool!" he lunged forward. But in that same instant, Kim's blade was already a blur, swinging for his face. The thug didn't even see it coming. The strike sent him flying backward through the air. Kim's sharp gaze darted to the right, catching another goon leaping down from above to ambush him. With a furious roar of "Die!" the attacker swung his weapon down, creating a crater in the ground. But Kim had vanished. The thug looked around in a panic, realizing he'd missed. In that moment, Kim reappeared, right beside him, his sword poised. "Looking for me," he taunted. A devastating blow sent the man tumbling into the crowd. Lyric watched, completely stunned. Another of his boys hit the ground. He couldn't believe what was happening. Sophomores were being taken down by a freshman, one after another. He stared at the defeated bodies littering the ground, and a terrible realization dawned. To become contractors, sophomores were supposed to be far superior. But against this freshman, they were nothing. The upperclassmen stared, bewildered by Kim's bizarre sword style. Kim advanced without a hint of urgency, his blade moving like an extension of his will. The sophomore leader, L, saw it then. Kim wasn't even trying, yet his men were being brutally beaten down. Kim's gaze then flickered to a few others, the ones hesitating on the sidelines. He warned them, a cold threat in his voice. "Move, or I'll smash your skulls!" Fear paralyzed them, and they started to retreat. Their leader saw the doubt spreading through his ranks. They were weighing their chances fight or flee. He roared with frustration. "Don't just stand there, attack!" After all, this was just some pathetic freshman. A faint smirk played on Kim's lips. This punk, at least, had some fire in him. L yelled for him to shut up, raising his own sword. He lunged forward to strike. But in an instant, Kim vanished. He reappeared right in front of him, the cold steel of his blade pressed against L's stomach. With a chilling smile, Kim spoke. "I warned you not to stand still." He tapped the pommel with his other hand, and a shockwave of force erupted through the blade, blasting through L. L coughed up a torrent of blood, his mind reeling. How did he get so close? So fast, his body gave out, and he collapsed as Kim crouched over him, raising a hand, and began slapping him awake. "Hey, get up!" He demanded to know who he was and why they attacked. L's eyes fluttered open. "We're sophomores." The scene was surreal, Kim casually interrogating their leader amidst a field of defeated upperclassmen. So, a pack of sunbays came to put a freshman in his place. Kim pressed him. "Why, who sent you? Name the person who ordered this." L averted his gaze, mumbling his answer. The order was simple: to shatter the ego of the #1 ranked freshman. Kim chuckled. "Is that all it took to hire you punks?" He feigned surprise, then grabbed his bag. "I'm leaving now," he announced casually. "Clean this mess up." As he walked away, L struggled to his feet. "Wait," he called out, his voice raw. "Do you really think you can just walk back into the academy after this? It doesn't matter if you're #1. L sneered through the pain. "When word of this gets out, you'll be expelled." Kim paused, casually picking his nose. "Doesn't matter to me," he said with a bored expression. He then asked, "You really want to tell everyone what happened?" L's face flushed with rage at the mocking tone. Kim laid out the truth for them. A whole group of sophomores ambushed a single freshman and failed miserably. If that story got out, could you even show your faces at the academy again? A vicious grin spread across Kim's face. He pointed at them. "Think carefully, if you ever want to graduate and join a decent guild." With that final threat, Kim turned and left. L could only tremble on the ground, defeated and humiliated. Meanwhile, Rockdeal sat comfortably on a couch, staring at his phone with a smug smile. He knew it would ring any second now. Just as he predicted, L's name flashed on the screen. Rockdeal answered, his voice dripping with condescension. "Sunbae?" he asked with a chuckle. "So, did you put Kim Ji-hyuk in his place?" But L's voice was filled with desperation. "Rockdeal, I'm quitting the job." Rockdeal's confident smirk vanished, replaced by sheer disbelief. He sat bolt upright. "What are you talking about?" L's strained voice came through the phone. Stay away from anything related to Kim Ji-hyuk." Rockdeal was speechless. This wasn't how things were supposed to go. The last time they spoke, L had been brimming with confidence. L spoke again, his voice final. "That's all." And he hung up. "Wait," Rockdeal shouted. "Are you saying this because Kim Ji-hyuk beat you?" "We can report him to the administration." L remained silent on the other end. Rockdeal tried to reason, his voice dangerously calm. If you have visible injuries, that's all the evidence we need. Just do that much for me. Do this, and I'll pay you the full amount we agreed on. I'll even see to it that my family personally finances your family's guild. But Elle's voice was hollow, even with the Ventric family's backing. We can never reclaim the honor we lost today. Rockdeal was stunned into silence. On the other end, Elle and his broken men began to walk away. Elle repeated, I'm hanging up. Rockdeal screamed his name, but it was too late. The line went dead. With a roar of fury, he hurled his phone to the ground, shattering it into pieces. That absolute fool! He sank back into the couch, head in his hands. Yuria stood beside him, watching the entire meltdown. He called out her name. Yuria, did you contact Dizir? She replied calmly. Yes, I told him you wished to meet him in person, but since he was so far away, it would take some time. Rocco glared at her, demanding to know where the hell he was. Meanwhile, at the magnificent Aria Academy in Mexico, a far more gruesome scene was unfolding. A mountain of corpses piled high within the building, and sitting atop this throne of death was a man, checking his phone. He was surprised Rockdale wanted him all the way in Korea. This man was Desir of Entric. Scars marred his otherwise well-groomed face. He opened the message from Rockdale. Come quickly. Take care of a man named Kim Jiak. Rockdale's message promised the reward was already prepared. As he read it, Desir's face twisted into a wide, manic smile. He stared at the screen like a predator, a thought crossing his mind. For a man who'd been cast out with nothing, this was an incredibly easy job. The very next day, a world away, in a training room packed with equipment, Kim Jiak arrived, bag in hand. He was stunned by the sheer size of the facility. He knew the academy was huge, but this was beyond his expectations. Looking around, he couldn't help but think he really wanted to get a good run in. Just then, a familiar voice echoed in his mind, asking why Kim was here. Kim froze, instantly on guard. He scanned the room, asking, Is that you, Baal? He couldn't tell where the voice was coming from. Baal explained that he was speaking from within the sealed sword. He then asked why Kim was so surprised. Kim scoffed. He was shocked because for a second, he thought Baal had somehow escaped to the surface. If that were the case, he'd have to beat him down and drag him back into the sword all over again. Baal flinched at the threat, but he didn't let it show. He quickly assured Kim that wasn't the case, so there was nothing to worry about. Accepting this for now, Kim changed into his gym clothes and stashed his gear in a locker. If you say so, fine. He placed a foot to the side and began to warm up. So, he asked, is everything really all right? Baal was confused by the question. So Kim clarified, putting his hands behind his head. He was talking about the sword. The one that had become an artifact, now kept deep within Valhalla. He reminded Baal that the Constellation was with him when they left it. Baal casually replied that there was no need to worry. He'd simply replaced the sword with a perfect replica. That's exactly what I'm worried about, Kim shot back. He asked Baal where on earth he'd learned to create a perfect copy of an object. Baal explained that when he regained consciousness, all his powers were gone. All except for the bizarre ability to create exact replicas, though even he didn't know how or why. As Kim continued his warm-up, he muttered that bards generally didn't know much about anything. As he tilted his body back, he saw Choi Erin standing before him. He finished his warm-up, realizing she had finally arrived. Erin cut right to the chase. Was he going to teach her swordsmanship right now? Kim looked her over and nodded. We're going to start by increasing your stamina. She tilted her head in confusion. Why? Kim turned away, his response blunt. If you don't want to, you can leave at any time. Her pride stung. Erin stared back defiantly. I'll do it. Kim turned back with a faint smile and told her to start stretching. He explained that the higher her stamina, the better she would absorb and control her vast reserves of mana in battle. It was a basic improvement, but an absolutely necessary foundation for swordsmanship. Erin began to warm up and stretch. Kim was amazed. It seemed these academy students poured everything they had into mana alone, completely neglecting their physical stamina. Even a prodigy like Choi Erin, who overflowed with powers, had the physical conditioning of a total beginner just picking up a sword. Once Erin finished, she declared herself ready. Kim looked at her with a serious expression. Then, the real training begins now. The grueling session kicked off with push-ups. While Kim executed them flawlessly, Erin struggled from the very first one. Next came weighted squats. Kim handled the heavy plates with ease, while Erin was already at her limit with no weights at all. Finally, they moved to deadlifts. While Kim lifted heavy, Erin could only manage small dumbbells. After the set, she collapsed to the floor, utterly spent. Her face was beet red and she was drenched in sweat. But Kim just turned to her and waved a hand. That was just the warm-up. Her eyes widened in disbelief. What Did you just say? He looked down at her. Stop lying around. Get up. We still have a 20-kilometer run. Hearing that, Aaron's mind went completely blank with shock. Later that day, back in the classroom, Kim sat at his desk, casually stretching his arm. He glanced over at Aaron. You feeling all right? He noted that even though they pushed much harder this time, she held up well. Her physique was already starting to develop. Aaron, however, sat frozen at her desk, every muscle in her body screaming in protest. A teacher stood at the front of the class, calling for silence. All right, everyone, settle down. We're having a simple written test today. The teacher's name was Lelia. She wore glasses and had short white hair. Inside Valhalla's highest academy, the students sat in rapt attention, listening to the lesson on spatial monsters. Instructor Lilia reiterated the basics from day one, advising them all to study the creatures in their own time. She then placed the exam papers on their desks, announcing a surprise test to gauge their knowledge, while Sawan dove right into the questions, and Sinak pondered them deeply. Erin slumped wearily in her seat, her body trembling, but Kim didn't even lift his pen. He just stared at the blank paper. Time's up, Lilia declared, watching the clock. Pass your tests forward. She explained this exam wouldn't affect their final grade, but would serve as a crucial assessment for the next class. As Kim passed his paper to Aaron, Lilia quickly graded the results. She announced their next lesson would be a virtual combat simulation, then opened the door to leave. I will see you then. With that, she was gone. As Kim sat in silence, a voice suddenly echoed in his mind. It was Barch, asking if he was truly certain about the answers he'd written. Kim realized Barch had seen it all. With his hands folded, Barch explained that from inside Kim's consciousness, he saw everything. Kim's mind was an open book. You can read my thoughts, Kim asked, his voice low. Barch corrected him. He could only hear what Kim was actively thinking. Kim leaned back in his chair, replying coolly that he simply wrote down what he knew to be true. If that's the case, Barch mused, then things are about to get interesting. Meanwhile, Lilia stormed into the faculty office. She slammed the papers down, seething with anger. How could he submit this absolute nonsense and call them answers? The scene shifts to Lian, another instructor, walking through the halls with a warm drink, lost in thought. He spots Lilia ahead, furiously grading her students' exams. Is that your class's work? He asked, approaching her. Yes, she sighed, not looking up. I was preparing them for the mock battle. I gave them a simple written test on monster weaknesses, and as expected. The students from prestigious families all passed with flying colors. Lian hesitated. Is that really so? Sensing her frustration, he held up his mug. Well, I won't disturb you then, he said, turning to leave. He took a sip, and immediately choked. He'd just heard Lilia shout out a student's name. Lian wiped his mouth as her furious voice echoed through the office. How could he possibly know these answers? Peeking over? Lian asked cautiously. Did Kim do that badly? She shot him a fiery glare. It's not just bad, she snapped. He's making a mockery of my entire class with this test. Is it really that awful? Lian pressed. Lilia held up the offending paper, her knuckles white. I can't just let this slide, she vowed. In the next class, I'll show him personally just how wrong he is. The very next day, the students stood before Lilia in the virtual battle simulation chamber. I have graded and returned the tests you took last session, she announced, her voice cold and sharp. Most of you performed exceptionally well. Her eyes then locked onto one student. Kim, bored. Kim casually walked forward as his name was called. Lilia thrust the test paper toward him. Take it. He took the exam, and his eyes widened slightly. A huge, glaring 0 was marked in red. You received 0 points, Lilia stated flatly. Are you absolutely sure you answered this test correctly? Kim looked her straight in the eye, his expression unwavering. Yes, I wrote the correct answers. Lilia's patience snapped. Question 1. How do you best deal with stone goblins? Your answer. Kim glanced at his paper. Stab them in the stomach with a sword. Lilia began to furiously rap her knuckles against her forehead. Question 2. You encounter 8 stone goblins. What is your strategy? The other students watched nervously as Kim calmly read from his test. Start with the one that rushes you first. Stab it, and send every last one of them to hell. Lilia whirled on him. You cannot be serious if you had shown even a shred of tactical knowledge. I might have let this go. She addressed the whole class. Is the best way to kill a stone goblin by stabbing its stomach? Of course not, she answered herself. Their defense is rated B+A, normal sword aura wouldn't even scratch them. And yet, you claim that's the answer. Kim, completely unfazed, began cleaning his ear with his pinky. That's exactly what I'd do, he said calmly, and it would all be over in a single blow. Lilia's rage finally boiled over. She thought to herself that Kim's ego knew no bounds. He was spouting complete and utter nonsense. But out loud, she said, I understand you perfectly. Kim's eyes widened in surprise. The instructor continued. Since you are so sure of your answer, I'll give you the chance to demonstrate it. She then pressed a button on the console before her. Instantly, the entire room began to shake. Snarling and drooling, stone goblins materialized from thin air. They stood behind the teacher, their monstrous gazes locked onto Kim. Lilia smiled. If you defeat these monsters, using the exact method you wrote, I will recalculate your score. Kim casually put a hand behind his head. Got it. I understand completely, he said, holding out the test paper. Permission to put this away first. He handed it off, then picked up a basic sword lying nearby and slowly strolled towards the goblins. With one hand still lazily in his pocket, he approached a goblin whose eyes glowed with a menacing red light. Lilia watched, deep in thought. She'd heard the rumors that he'd slain 120 summoned goblins alone. She knew he had talent, but stone goblins couldn't be felled by some random training sword. Kim simply raised the blade, and as the goblin charged, he swung. In an instant, there was a sickening impact. Lilia stood frozen in shock. She couldn't even process what had just happened. The stone goblin was paralyzed, its body trembling with a sword buried in its chest. Cracks spread across the creature's stony face before it shattered into motes of light. Kim casually held out his hand. The other students stared, their jaws on the floor. Lilia was just as stunned. Kim turned to face her and said, See, you just pierced them in the stomach. Sohn was speechless. He'd killed a stone goblin with a normal sword, and without an ounce of magic. Sinok stood by, silently observing, while Aaron watched the entire scene with a knowing smile. Lilia couldn't believe what she was seeing. Kim returned the sword to its rack. How did you do that? She demanded. He just shrugged. Didn't you see I stuck the pointy end in its stomach? That's all. Lilia clenched her fist. That's not what I meant. Biting her finger in shock, her mind raced. To defeat a stone goblin with an ordinary weapon, one would need to be at least a contractor-class hunter. That would make sense of his power, but to do it with a standard-issue sword was impossible. Kim slung the blade over his shoulder with a grin. So, was my answer correct? Lilia snapped back. That was only question 1. She slammed another key on the console. The ground began to rumble once more. Again? Kim asked. The floor beneath his feet transformed, revealing a dark cave. He pointed. Teach. What's this now? Lilia crossed her arms. Shouldn't you be a bit more cautious? Look ahead of you. A single goblin appeared, and from the darkness behind it, a horde of glowing eyes emerged. Dozens of goblins, wielding crude bats, glared at Kim with pure malice. Lilia folded her arms, analyzing the situation. She knew this type of goblin was governed by uncontrollable anger, making them incredibly difficult to suppress. If they weren't handled perfectly, the leader would use its howl skill, summoning every other goblin in the vicinity. Most hunters would use wide-range magic to incinerate them all at once. The only other option was to run. From Kim's perspective, 3 growling goblins were already charging, with 5 more right behind. A single mistake would mean being swarmed. Even for a master swordsman, this was a nearly impossible challenge. And according to her reports, his sword speed was supposed to be slow. Kim merely shifted the sword to his other hand and swung. With a calm smile, he skewered the first goblin's head clean through. The goblin next to it froze in terror. It opened its mouth to use its skill, to let out the summoning scream. But Kim's blade was already plunging down its throat. He stood calmly, holding the sword that silenced the beast. Lilia watched in utter disbelief. Kim turned around, that same confident smile on his face as he held the dripping sword. So, was my second answer correct? The scene shifts, transporting us to the academy gym where Kim is running on a treadmill. Aaron is on the machine next to him, looking completely exhausted as the screen displays her target goal. Suddenly, she collapses to the floor, gasping for air while Kim continues his run without breaking a sweat. He glanced down at her. Didn't they train you in your clan? Why is a basic exercise like this so difficult for you? She looked up, panting. I don't usually push myself this hard. Kim stared at her coldly. Then how do you train? How do you possibly expect to face real monsters? Aaron held up a single finger. I just use my magic power, by borrowing it from my constellations. He looked at her thoughtfully. It was exactly as he'd expected. He looked down at Aaron, her eyes shut from exhaustion, and realized the truth. Instead of honing their stamina, everyone focused solely on magic power, relying completely on their constellations. Even if their physical skills atrophied, they thought it was fine, a small price to pay, to borrow a constellation's might. But Kim knew the risk was catastrophic. What would they do? If trapped in a magic ceiling maze, he pictured it clearly, a group of mages, their mana completely depleted. After a drawn-out battle, with a hand to his chin, he wondered if a constellation would even lend its power in such a state. He called out to Aaron, who immediately turned to him. Did those endurance exercises help? She shot to her feet, bowing deeply. Yes, they were incredibly helpful, Erin replied, her eyes bright, remembering Kim's promise. He would teach her his swordsmanship if she completed the training. A slight smile touched his lips. And what's your answer? She admitted she only did it because he instructed her to. Erin watched him, a thoughtful expression on her face. But Kim simply said it didn't matter. He turned away, suggesting they wrap up for the day. We have to get to the academy soon. Erin looked at him, asking, Aren't you coming? Kim glanced back, stating he was going to do one more set. Care to join me? He offered. She looked up, exhaustion etched on her face. Kim just waved a hand dismissively. Never mind. Just go on ahead. Erin walked to the door, promising to see him later. Kim silently approached the weight plates and began to load the bar. Barch's voice echoed. Is her name Choi Erin? Kim simply asked what of it. As he stacked more plates onto the barbell, Barch noted that she followed his training without a single complaint. The entity couldn't understand why Kim had decided to personally help her. Kim coolly stated it was only because she was so persistent about learning his swordsmanship. Have you ever actually shown it to her? Barch pressed. Never demonstrated it directly, Kim replied. But she's sharp. She noticed when I used it in class. Closing his eyes, Kim mulled it over. Barch questioned if she truly understood his power. Kim admitted he'd wondered the same thing and was intrigued. He planned to teach her a few of his techniques. Just then, a grunt of exertion broke the silence. He glanced over and saw Senak lifting a heavy barbell. Senak set the weight down and stood, their eyes meeting across the room. A silent acknowledgement passed between them. How long have you been here? Kim asked. Senak dried himself with a towel. Since before you were a student, he answered. He explained that working out before heading to the academy was just part of his daily ritual. After a moment, he slung the towel over his shoulders and stood to leave. I have to go. Kim watched him, a thoughtful look on his face. He mused that it might be due to his innate martial talent, but the fact that he could train for so long was a gift in itself. He watched Senak exit the gym. Barch reappeared, asking why he was so focused on that man. Kim lay, back on the bench. He's already miles ahead of those fools who only train their magic. Barch conceded that was probably true. Kim grabbed the barbell, asking, So what are the constellations up to? Anyway, Barch admitted he wasn't sure what. Kim was getting at. For 300 years, his own constellation had been isolated here, knowing nothing about the others. As Kim took the weight, Barch added that he could learn more if he completed a new constellation quest within the system. Kim pushed the barbell up, his mind racing. A new constellation. Instantly, a system window blazed to life before him. Return your weapons and memories. Please return your weapon memories. Location Valhalla, 3rd floor, 5th room to the right. The quest was called Eye of the Great Forest of Valhalla, Home of Maid. Guna. A warning followed. The heavenly sword is required for clear conditions. The rest of the conditions had been censored. Kim read the panel, his mind clicking. I've heard of this place in class. It was the final training ground for the first semester. He sighed. If it weren't for this accursed quest, he would have grabbed his things and vanished. But now, it seemed he'd have to stay in the spotlight a while longer. Barch questioned his talk of staying hidden, reminding him of the massive fuss he just made fighting that bully. Kim scoffed. Those upperclassmen came looking for me, he declared. And trust me, I was holding back. Barch listened intently, then remarked that if he hadn't, their heads would have cracked wide open. Kim looked down, resolute. In any case, he said, until this assignment is done, I'm stuck here. He hoped it would finally solve the mystery of his reincarnation. The scene then shifts, transporting us to the UK, London. Before us looms a colossal building, the Ventric family mansion. Inside, the halls were lined with mirrors and paintings, all adorned with the black masks of plague doctors. A man sat at a grand table, while another stood opposite him. A woman, leaning over a pile of reports, demanded they tell her exactly what happened. This was the vice president, Adelia Ventry. The man began to speak about the maze. The situation on the outskirts of Reading has been contained. Adelia smiled. A job well done. Is there anything else? Her subordinate spoke. I plan to recruit a few competent individuals I've discovered. They are interesting, he continued. A survivor from Robert's shattered clan has emerged from the maze. Strong enough, I presume, Adelia mused. Indeed, the man confirmed. The two I found are both A-rank contractors. Adelia raised her hand, a faint glow emanating from it. At that level, they are worthy of a blessing. First, test their abilities, then send them to me. The man bowed his head. I understand completely. Anything else? She pressed. Yes, I have information regarding Rockdale. Adelia's eyes narrowed. What has he done now? Reports confirm he has summoned Desire to South Korea. Adelia's expression hardened, her gaze piercing the air as she considered the name. Desire. The scene shifts to Daru, a wicked smile twisting his lips. He was the black sheep of his family, a true problem child. He committed countless terrible acts, hiding behind his family's name, leaving a trail of broken and bullied students in his wake. At 19, he murdered 5 people at an English academy over a simple argument. By 20, he was finally exiled from the Ventric family. Adelia sat, lost in thought. Desire had been in hiding for so many years. Why would he meet with Rockdale now? Her voice was cold as steel. Continue your surveillance of Rockdale. He bowed deeply. Your will shall be done. But as he looked up, her next words sent a chill down his spine. If he makes one strange move, I will personally cast you out of the family. The man bowed lower, his voice trembling. I understand. My report is concluded. He quickly departed, leaving Adelia alone in the silence. Her thoughts turned dark. All these fools wielding power, they don't deserve. Such strength was never meant for worthless scum. Her gaze grew sharp, filled with absolute conviction. This power is meant for only one. A sly smile crept onto her face. After all, everything is for me. Her eyes shifted to a painting of a plague doctor's mask. Isn't that right? She asked the guardian constellation. We are then transported to a classroom, where a teacher explains. If you want to define the word villain, it comes from the words evil, and performer, literally meaning an evil person. He gestured dramatically to the class. However, in today's society, a villain is one who uses the powers gifted by the constellations for their own evil deeds. The teacher wrote villain on the board. They usually act alone, but sometimes they form organizations. As the lecture continued, Kim, sitting in the back, stared intently at his own hand. Among these groups, the teacher said, the most infamous is the One God cult. The teacher spoke of constellations, but Kim's mind was elsewhere, his hand slowly clenching into a fist. He could feel it, this new body. It grew stronger with even simple training, but it also possessed a hidden talent for mana. He studied his palm. It might not be a genius-level gift, but it was leagues beyond, his body from his previous life. Still, something felt incredibly off. He stared at his hand, a deep puzzle in his mind. No matter how untrained this body was, why was its condition so utterly abysmal? He remembered that first day, trying to circulate the mana in his body. He barely completed a single rotation, possessing less mana than an ordinary person. And while digging that hole, his stamina was so poor. A little exertion brought him to the brink of losing consciousness. But even with a body this neglected, it shouldn't have been this weak. Kim was certain of it. Something terrible must have happened to this body in the past. He leaned back, lacing his fingers behind his head. No point in worrying about it now. Just then, a soft tap echoed on his desk. Kim glanced to the side. It was So-on, turned around in her seat. She quietly slid a small, folded note toward him. Kim picked it up, unfolding it. Inside, a single word, hello. Kim's brow furrowed in annoyance. What was the point of all this later that day, as evening settled? An announcement was made. Students were permitted to leave the academy for the weekend, but only if they applied for leave. Kim sat at his desk, listening to the prefect's instructions. When he finished, Kim was already thinking about getting out of the academy. He grabbed an application form, filled it out for a simple walk outside, and headed for the front. Are you really going out? Barge asked. Kim nodded. Yeah, I've got somewhere I need to be. Where to? Before he could answer, a voice called his name. He turned. So-on was standing right behind him. He sighed. Is this some kind of joke? What do you want from me? So-on just stood there, her head lowered. I even bothered to reply to your note, Kim said, frustrated. But you didn't say anything back. He held up his application, his patience wearing thin. Look, just spit it out. I have to turn this in. So-on looked up, her expression a mix of awkwardness and determination, struggling to find her words. So-on was utterly speechless, frozen by what she couldn't bring herself to say. Kim's patience snapped. Just spit it out already, he growled. Are you crazy? He demanded. So-on simply stared back, asking why her question was so abnormal. Kim glared at her. Are you trying to say something or just trying to piss me off? He pressed. What is it? But So-on's mind was reeling. An image flashed in her memory, him effortlessly taking down a stone goblin. The sheer impossibility of it was staggering. He had used nothing but a plain sword. No magic, no special skills. Everything she had ever read told her it was impossible. She looked at him, the question burning on her lips. How did you kill that stone goblin? But before she could speak, a crippling headache struck her. Just as she tried to force the words out, Teacher Lilia materialized between them. Mr. Kim? She asked, with an unnerving calm. Perhaps you could tell me how you killed that goblin? They all stood in a silent, tense standoff. Kim was stunned. Where in the world did she come from? He stared at his teacher, who pointed to herself and demanded, Why are you interrupting? A cynical thought crossed his mind. I thought you hated me, he said flatly. It only makes sense, he continued. I publicly tore down your arguments. You should despise me for embarrassing you in front of everyone. But Lilia just smiled, completely unbothered. Oh, that it doesn't trouble me in the slightest. You simply showed me there was more than one way to kill monsters, she said. She placed a hand on his shoulder. So, would you like to be my assistant? He looked at her, shocked. I'll have to refuse, he said firmly. I might be given an application, but... Ignoring his rejection, the teacher grabbed his hand and started walking. But why not, she insisted. Just become my assistant. I said I won't do it, Kim repeated. Behind them, Sohn watched, her hand outstretched, trying to call out to him. I'll provide you with everything you could possibly need, the teacher promised. Kim scoffed. Have you no shame, forcing me like this? Why on earth should I be embarrassed? She asked. Sohn stood listening to their argument. She closed her eyes, a determined smile forming on her lips as she clenched her fist. This doesn't change a thing. The next day, Kim, his face obscured by a hood, stared forward. He stood on a crowded street before a massive building. This was the notorious Valhalla evening market. Later, back in his dorm. Kim sat at his computer. Suddenly, a notification lit up his smartphone, prompting a search. What was he looking for? Kim began typing, searching for information. He needed to find a trading hub, a place to sell the treasures from the vault. This place is quite interesting, he murmured to himself, scrolling through the results. There. He found what he was looking for and immediately tapped the link. It was a website detailing everything about the market. With a swift tap of his stylus, he opened the headline. Kim quickly absorbed the information. Pay an entry fee, and you gain access to a place where anything can be traded freely across the continent. He instantly understood, since this market connected users from all over the world. It was, for all intents and purposes, a black market. The currency traded on it was unique. He realized the only reason such an unthinkable market could exist was because its creator was a guardian constellation, known only as the Hidden Ruler. He rested his chin on his hand, processing the information. If a guardian constellation created and actively supported it, it meant that even high-ranking individuals used it openly. Kim realized that even though it was technically illegal, the government was powerless to stop it. This was why information on entry was so easy to find. He scanned the article. He would definitely need to use this place. The author began, Today, I will reveal to my readers how to enter the all-access market. It turned out there was nothing particularly special about the method. Users simply had to click a link in the comments to reserve a spot. Once reserved, all users were given coordinates. A location would appear within 50 kilometers of their current position. The instructions were simple: follow the coordinates, find the door, and step through. Kim finished reading the entire article. He was surprised. The link was right there in the comments section, just as the article had promised. For a moment, he hesitated to follow the link, or to close the page. But his finger was already moving toward the go button. At that exact moment, a message from Choi Ah-ran lit up his screen. Her text was filled with sad emojis. He immediately asked her what was wrong. She replied that she had to leave urgently. She wouldn't be able to make tomorrow's training session. A small smile played on Kim's lips. This was perfect. He now had a free schedule to visit the market. Kim wished her a successful trip. In response, she sent him a happy emoji. Sitting back in his chair, Kim was slightly perplexed. She kept sending him these things. He couldn't quite understand why, but in the end, it didn't really matter. The post had promised a secret link in the comments, a key to reserving a seat and learning the location. When he saw the notification, he knew it was time. He clicked it without a second thought, moving through the streets like a shadow. Hood pulled low. He followed the digital breadcrumbs. Then he stopped. Lifting his head from his phone, he realized the path had led him to an old, forgotten cafe. The same abandoned place, trapped in a state of perfect chaos. A place no one had touched for years. Chairs were overturned. Thick cobwebs draped every surface, and a heavy darkness clung to the air. Standing in the center of the decay, he glanced at his phone. The instructions were clear: go to the far right corner. Kim approached the door and pushed it open, revealing a path leading straight to a hidden backyard. A vast, sprawling alleyway opened up before him, teeming with a secret market that shouldn't exist. The people around him were phantoms, their faces hidden behind elaborate masks. A strange feeling washed over him. Why did this place feel so familiar when he'd never set foot here before? He stood frozen in shock, the eerie purple sky above, the clouded moon hanging like a scarred jewel. It was identical to the night sky he remembered from 300 years ago. A voice cut through his thoughts. First time here. Kim glanced to his left, his eyes locking onto a tall, red-haired man. And then he saw it. The leather suit. The final message on his device flashed through his mind. The instructions had been specific. Bring 2 million won to the market's entrance. There, an employee in a leather suit would be waiting to collect the money. It was the price of admission. The market was a gold mine, but it came with a catch, a 5% commission on every single one earned. Kim's voice was tense. Are you the one from the post? The young man's lips curled into a slight smile. I am, he then asked. So, you already know how our market works? Kim pulled a thick wad of cash from his pocket. I understand the rules well enough, he replied, handing over the fortune. The young man accepted it with a nod. Kim felt a pang of loss, knowing he'd just spent nearly all his prize money. The money he'd won for taking first place on the entrance exams? He only had 30,000 won left. But a fire ignited within him. In this place, he would earn it all back and more. Is there anything else? The man asked. Kim held out his hand. I have some jewelry I need to sell. I don't have time to put them up for auction. Kim clarified before the man could even ask. Then I recommend you head to the market in the 3rd district, the man advised. You'll find countless merchants there who buy jewelry, artifacts, anything you can imagine. Kim pressed on. And who's the most reliable merchant in that row? The man in the suit didn't hesitate. Look for a salesman named Morris. He's known for having the best prices. As a final question, Kim asked for the way to the 3rd district. The man simply raised his hand. He pointed towards a distant passage between the houses. Go straight. When you see a fork in the road, turn right. But that's not all, the man said, producing a striking purple mask. It was fashioned after a dark panther. I strongly recommend you wear this, he said. Given the nature of the goods here, all visitors and sellers prefer to remain anonymous. Kim took the mask, studying its design. Consider it a small welcome gift, the man added with a knowing look. He lifted it to his face, the world shifting as he secured it. Thank you, he said, before saying his farewell. Now masked, Kim began exploring the 3rd district, searching for his target. He observed the strange collection of buyers and sellers until he saw him a man in a white mask, inspecting a diamond. Are you Morris? He asked. The man looked up from his work, his eyes sharp. That's me. Kim gave a slight bow. I was told you might be interested. I have a few items I'd like to sell immediately. Morris leaned back. It all depends on the items, but if you have gold or jewelry, I can give you a quick appraisal. Without another word, Kim unslung his backpack, searching through its contents. He pulled out a black pouch and tossed it on the table. I want to sell these. Morris opened the bag, his gaze immediately locking onto the contents. Rings. He began to examine them with an expert's eye. He examined the jewels through his loupe, when his eyes widened in shock. A strangled gasp escaped his lips. It was an authentic artifact from the dreaded era of destruction. He clutched a red emerald ring in his hand, his grip tightening. There was no mistaking it. No matter how he looked, it radiated the unmistakable energy of that bygone age. He glanced at the entire bag, a cold realization dawning on him. They were all from the era of destruction. As he stared at the pouch of rings, they seemed to glow with immense power. His expression twisted in disbelief. Every single one was a relic from the first era. Suddenly, a voice called out, and he spun around, startled. It was Kim, approaching casually with a hand in his pocket. So, he asked, what's your offer? Morris stroked his chin, his mind racing. Give me a moment, he muttered, trying to comprehend how this young man possessed so many legendary items. Judging by his voice, the kid was barely over 20. He looked up, his suspicion growing. Where did you get all these? Morris immediately bowed his head over the rings. You're right, my apologies. That was a mistake. He began to inspect a ring again, realizing he'd been so mesmerized by the artifacts. He'd asked a forbidden question, a question that could have shattered his reputation as a merchant in this marketplace. He lifted his head, his voice strained. I can't possibly put a price on these. He pushed the bag away gently. You don't understand. These are relics from the Age of Destruction. Their value is immeasurable. What Morris truly meant was simple. He didn't have anywhere near the capital required to purchase such treasures. Kim picked up the bag, mulling over the name. The Age of Destruction. He met the merchant's gaze. Then where can I go to get what these are worth? Morris pointed towards the exit. On your way here, you must have seen the tall building. That's the Grand Auction Hall. Kim considered this. If I consign them to auction, How long until I see the payment? Morris calculated for a moment. On average, it takes about 2 or 3 weeks. The reservation list is long, and there are many powerful bidders. It will be some time before the next auction even opens. Kim's face fell. That meant more delays. And a personal visit to the market, Morris added. You'll also need to go through a strict verification process to collect the funds. Kim sighed. What a complete pain. He looked at Morris again. Even if you can't buy them all. How much do you think I could get from the auction? Morris's eyes lit up. Let me give you a rough idea. He pulled out his device, typed in a staggering figure, and showed the screen to Kim. You could earn about this much. Kim was stunned. He couldn't believe his eyes. How could these trinkets be worth so much? He knew these artifacts were valuable in his past life, which is why he'd kept them hidden. He looked at Morris, trying to stay composed. Is that an accurate price? The merchant stroked his chin thoughtfully. That's not exact, just my personal appraisal. If a bidding war breaks out at the auction, the final price could be far, far higher, Morris admitted. Even if I sold everything I own. I could only afford to buy 3/4 of these jewels. Kim's gaze sharpened. Is that so? After a moment of silence, he declared, Then sell me as much as you can afford. Morris shot up from his chair, his heart pounding. Artifacts from the Destruction era were valuable not just for their age, but for one unbelievable reason: their connection to the constellations. These celestial beings began to appear after that era ended, and for some unknown reason, the artifacts that survived reacted to their power. Morris picked up the ring again, his hands trembling. A powerless nobody was once able to forge a contract with an S-rank constellation, all thanks to an item just like this one. If he recalled correctly, its owner was called the Alchemist Zone, a contractor who became a legend. Morris held the ring, feeling its faint, purple aura pulse against his skin. He examined it again, now certain of its origin. The distinct flow of mana within it, a remnant of the magic unleashed at the end of the Age of Destruction. Still active after all this time? Morris's mind raced. An artifact from that era must bear the marks. 8 artifacts. To think he could acquire even one for a fraction of its true worth. He carefully placed the ring back in the bag. Today was truly his lucky day. Just then, a dark shadow fell over him. He looked up, expecting a customer. But his expression immediately froze in shock and fear. Standing before him was a uniformed figure in a strange cat mask. Elsewhere, Kim burst through a door, tearing off an identical mask and gasping for air. This thing is so uncomfortable, he muttered. I thought I was going to die. He glanced around the empty room, seeing only a scattered table and chairs. If I remember the rules correctly, he thought, exiting through the entrance door should return me to my original location. This had to be the cafe. He flipped open his phone, the transaction history glowing on the screen. The money problem was officially a thing of the past. He never imagined he could make a fortune this quickly. He walked on, his eyes glued to the screen, knowing that even if his cash ran out, his storage was filled with priceless artifacts. As he moved forward, his phone suddenly buzzed, catching Kim completely off guard. He couldn't place the number. Glancing at the unknown caller, he hesitated for a moment. He brought the phone to his ear and answered. The voice on the other end belonged to his cheerful instructor. It was Lilia. She greeted him warmly and asked what he was up to, before suggesting they grab a bite to eat together. Kim stopped dead in the street. How did you get my number? Lilia just chuckled, explaining she was an instructor at Valhalla. It doesn't matter, she insisted, brushing off his question. Just come meet me for lunch at the Valhalla Fitness Hall. Lilia promised it would be her treat. Kim began to politely decline, but looked at his phone with a flash of annoyance. Before he could even finish his sentence, she hung up. He kept walking, wondering if he should just go for the free meal. After all, he had absolutely nothing else planned. The scene then shifts, and we're brought to Morris. He was facing a mysterious man in a mask. Why are you here? Morris demanded. The stranger simply asked if their relationship was that hostile. Morris stared back coldly. Even if we've met a few times, he said. An ordinary merchant? Doesn't get to casually speak with the owner of the market. This masked man was the master of the Black Cat Black Market. The Black Cat seemed amused. I like your tone, he said. Morris stood before him, listening in absolute silence. He looked the man dead in the eye and repeated his question. Why are you here? The Black Cat placed a hand on the table. I'm just curious, he purred. It seemed that for the first time in ages, Morris had placed an anonymous bid in the auction. Morris was taken aback by this revelation. He stared ahead, realizing his assumption was wrong. He had thought the anonymous application was truly untraceable. The Black Cat gestured to himself. The true owner of this market isn't me, he explained, but my constellation, and it can find out anything. Just then, a system panel appeared before him. A single line repeated over and over, Your constellation desires the ring. The message pulsed with an obsessive energy. The black cat stood there, holding the ring, a grim look on his face. It's obvious, he muttered. My constellation wants this ring. Badly. Meanwhile, we cut back to Kim, sitting across from Lilia. They were in a fancy restaurant inside Valhalla, with plates of delicious food and a pizza between them. Lilia skillfully twirled some pasta onto her fork, took a bite, and smiled with pure delight. This is amazing, she exclaimed. But Kim just stared off into the distance, completely silent. Lilia's smile faltered. She noticed he hadn't touched a single thing. Why aren't you eating? She asked. Kim's gaze remained fixed elsewhere. I'm just trying to figure out why a place like this exists inside Valhalla, he said flatly. Lilia raised her index finger with a bright smile. Besides the student and faculty cafeterias, there are also exclusive faculty restaurants. You really didn't know? She asked. Kim barely glanced at her. I wasn't interested. He finally took a bite of food. So, why did you call me here, instructor? Lilia's cheerful demeanor turned serious. That's exactly what I wanted to talk about. As Kim reached for a slice of pizza, she stood up and dropped the bomb. Be my assistant. Kim's immediate answer was, no? Lilia leaned forward, urging him. At least think about it before giving me such a cold answer. If you become my assistant, she declared, you'll have advantages that normal students can only dream of. Kim took a bite of his pizza, listening intently. Everything she said was being processed behind his stoic expression. When an instructor invites you out and you agree, she pressed. Didn't you realize we'd be discussing something important? Just hear me out. Kim sat in silence for a moment, then finally asked, what are these advantages? Lilia beamed. She shot up from her seat again, her finger held high. First of all, you'll receive a full scholarship. That alone is a massive perk, she said proudly. Kim was unmoved. And then, you'll also get the chance to co-author a thesis with me, she continued. If you do, you'll open up a whole new world of opportunities. Kim simply closed his eyes and continued to eat. The teacher leaned in, her voice filled with excitement. If that happens, your name will become famous throughout the entire institute. Think of the monster research. The wealth and honor will naturally follow. His expression remained unchanged. What else? He asked. Lilia took a deep breath. Instead of only being allowed to leave campus once a month, you'll get to go out more than 2 times a week. Kim finished his slice, considering her final offer. A slice of pizza, wondering what else was on the menu. Lilia paused, a thoughtful finger on her chin, and proposed a deal. He could work with her. Kim simply picked up a piece, ready to dig in, and told her she seemed a little full of herself. Furious, Lilia slammed the table, begging him once more to be her assistant. Kim watched her outburst in silence. He just offered her a forkful of macaroni and flatly refused. In his head, however, the gears were turning. If there was a great benefit to be had, he would consider the offer again. But right now, she had nothing he truly needed. He ate, his mind focused on the system message. He understood what was truly important at this moment. He had to find the eye of the Great Forest. His only chance to get there was during the academic performance assessment, for the first year. So Kim made it clear he had no intention of being her assistant or writing some thesis. This blatant refusal ignited at her anger. Lilia stared him down, saying she had one more proposal, a final play. She suggested an exchange of information. Kim continued to eat, completely unimpressed. So the instructor pressed on. If she gave him information he desired, he would have to reveal his secrets on how to hunt monsters. Kim finally bit. What kind of information? A triumphant smile spread across Lilia's face. It's about Choi Erin, the girl you've been training with. Kim thought it over, assuming their connection was only due to their training. Not interested, he declared. But Lilia played her trump card. I heard Choi Erin is about to be disowned by her family. Kim's hands slammed onto the table. All right then. He rose from his seat, announcing his departure. The instructor shot up, holding out a hand to stop him. Where are you going? She demanded. Kim glanced back, his expression cold. I'm done eating, and I haven't heard anything useful, so I'm leaving. Lilia, hands planted on the table, shot back. I gave you the information, so now it's your turn. But Kim looked at her coolly and said he never wanted to hear that information. But you listened anyway, Lilia insisted. A different look crossed Kim's face. You know, there is something I'm really curious about. He asked why an instructor who acts like a child in a fight is so unbelievably strict when teaching students. Her playful demeanor vanished. A serious look took over. Because I am the most responsible instructor here. If I joke around too much while teaching, my students could face serious problems. She looked to the side, her voice filled with conviction. Monster hunting is directly linked to the student survival rate. And if I become lenient, They'll lose focus in a real battle, and could very well die. Kim studied her for a moment. So you're just playing a part? Lilia smiled. Not at all, she countered. I am simply doing my job as an instructor. A genuine smile spread across Kim's face. Is that so? That's actually pretty cool. With that, he turned and headed for the exit, raising his hand in farewell. Keep up the good work, Lilia called after him. You still have to repay me for what I told you. But Kim just stuffed his hands in his pockets, continuing his unhurried pace towards the kangi. Exit, saying he didn't have to do a thing. The scene shifts, revealing a massive, traditional estate. This is the stronghold of the Choi clan. Inside, a man sits at a table before two younger people. He looks ahead and speaks. The reason I've summoned you today is to confirm your intentions before the family's succession trial begins. The man wore a kimono, his gray eyes as sharp as steel. He was the guildmaster of the Jin Guild, and the patriarch of the Choi clan. His name was Choi Jong-guk. Opposite him was a young man, a hunter of the Jin Guild and the eldest son of the clan's main family. He had the same dark hair as Jong-guk. This was Choi Jin-hyun. Also sitting nearby was a girl, the second daughter of the Choi family, Choi Erin. Jong-guk took up a sword and declared that if they pass the selection trial, they will earn the right to wield the Blue Moon Sword, a sacred family relic. He unsheathed the katana, a token of recognition for the one true heir. Afterward, he put the blade away, his tone turning to ice. However, should you fail, according to family tradition, you will be cast out from this family. He gave them a piercing look and asked if they still wished to undertake this test. The eldest son stood immediately, declaring he would pass the trial. Erin also stated that she would do it. Jong-guk approached Erin, his vicious aura like a crushing weight, and handed her a different sword. He closed his eyes. Good. He looked at them both. The qualifying test will begin in 3 weeks. You are dismissed. Later, as Erin and Jin-hyun walked together, he asked her if she was really that insensitive. Erin looked up, confused. What do you mean? Jin-hyun turned on her, his voice dripping with scorn. Did you not see the look on father's face when you accepted? So, she was really going to compete in the selection trials. Erin paused, her father's furious expression flashing in her mind. A cruel smile spread across Jing's face. He sneered. Thinking she'd finally give up her ridiculous quest for a place in the family, Erin stood before him, fists clenched, enduring his venomous words. An illegitimate child like you actually wants it, he mocked. Fury ignited within her, but she kept her silence, staring at the arrogant man before her. With a malicious grin, he taunted her, telling her to look at his impassive face. He warned her not to expect a victory. After all, someone with mere constellation protection could never match him. A true heir with a proper contract. He stepped closer, his gaze dripping with contempt as Erin lowered her head. Jing declared that while she sat back and watched her family's wealth dwindle, he would make her understand. He would make her pay the price for her idleness. He turned, opening the door but paused for a final, cutting glance. We'll meet in 3 weeks, he hissed. But Erin remained rooted to the spot, lost in a painful memory. She saw a woman, exhausted and weak, calling her name. A little Erin held her hand, tears streaming down her face. The woman whispered that Erin was meant to be the family head, to take that position and do whatever she wished. Erin snapped her eyes shut, then opened them again, a new fire of determination burning within her. The scene shifts. We are now in Class 1. Kim and the other students watch as Leanne writes on the blackboard. Kim observed in silence. Bart leaned over, whispering that the midterm exams were approaching fast. Kim, surprised, wondered why he was so worried. As Leanne continued the lesson, Bart insisted that Kim should have been paying more attention. He asked if Kim's homeroom teacher hadn't explained the midterms. Kim simply asked if it was a big deal. Bart confirmed he usually tuned out during class. Leanne addressed the class, his voice echoing with authority. Most of you should know this, he began. But at Alagi, these exams are everything. The entire class listened, a palpable tension filling the air. Leanne's next words were a death sentence. In both the midterm and final exams, the student with the lowest score will be expelled, immediately. His gaze swept over them. You will all do your best. Kim stared forward, processing the teacher's decree. I expect everyone to prepare for both the written and practical tests, Leanne finished, urging them to give their all. But Kim just stared blankly. He knew the truth. The practical test was nothing compared to the written exam. He had to stay in this school, at least until he reached the window of the Great Forest. But a crucial piece of the puzzle was missing. Suddenly, it hit him. He turned to Bart, who stood with his hands clasped nervously. Have you attended all the classes? Kim asked. Bart confirmed he probably had, then cautiously asked what Kim was scheming. A sly grin spread across Kim's face. Then you'll write the test for me. Bart was utterly stunned. How could you possibly do that? He stammered. Kim leaned back in his chair, head resting on his hand. Simple, he said. I'll just write the test. Instead of you. Bart folded his arms, completely against the idea. I don't like this plan. It's not fair. The mere thought of Kim's plan terrified him. Picturing their teacher's enraged face, Kim just smirked. Not fair. I'll write the test, he repeated. And someone else will give me the answers. That's how you'll write the test for me. Up front, Leanne closed his folder. That's all for today's class, he announced. Good luck to all of you. As the students thanked him, Kim began to pack his bag, but a voice suddenly called out to him. He turned in surprise to see Aaron approaching. Why did you call me? He asked. Aaron met his gaze directly. Are we training today? Kim looked her over, a bit puzzled. Why do you ask? Are you already thinking of quitting our training? He teased. Aaron stood before him, her hands clasped tightly. That's not it at all, she quickly replied. Kim's curiosity was piqued. Then what is it? He ventured a guess, her surprised expression telling him he was right. You want to learn swordsmanship? He looked at her thoughtfully. I suppose it's time we talked about it. For all your training, you barely know how to use a sword. Kim casually picked at his ear. What we did before wasn't real sword art. It's time I showed you how to properly wield a blade. He glanced in her direction, thinking to himself that it was a good chance for him to practice with his own weapon too. Seeing Aaron's eyes light up with pure joy, he told her to meet him at the training hall. I'll be there, she promised. The scene changes to the training hall. Aaron stands before Kim, who holds a practice sword in his hand. He pointed the blade at her. How long has it been, he asked, since you last held your own weapon? Aaron looked down at the sword. A day and a half, she admitted. I haven't touched it since we began. As they trained, Kim noted her dedication, telling her it was clear she'd been practicing every single day. Kim then challenged her directly. Draw your sword. Instantly, Aaron's hand went to the hilt of her blade. But before she could fully draw, Kim pointed out a flaw. Focus, he instructed. On your ring and little fingers. Grip the hilt with all your might. Aaron was startled by such a simple correction. Ring and pinky? But as she adjusted, her grip became unbelievably solid. A wave of surprise washed over her. She could feel the very aura of the blade change in her hands. It felt completely different. Even without infusing magic, her stance felt more stable than ever before. Seeing this, Kim gave his command. Now, attack me with everything you have. Aaron's eyes hardened as she nodded. Sheathing her sword, she took her stance. And for a moment, it was as if arcs of lightning erupted from her very being. As she began to unsheath her blade again, her mind raced, calculating her explosive leg speed. She launched her attack, but he moved with impossible agility, raising an arm to block her strike. The very air trembled from the impact. A smile touched Kim's lips. You're much faster than before. She leaped back as Kim countered with a casual swing. Don't waste magic on your legs, he advised. Aaron landed gracefully, her sword held ready. I'll do my best, she declared. Sheathing her blade once more, she exploded forward, unleashing a lightning-fast strike at Kim. But he evaded it with effortless grace. He smiled, impressed. Your movements are much more fluid. Tightening his own grip, he offered another piece of advice. When you stop, pivot your body more. He then struck her sword, and the impact sent it flying back. Aaron regained her footing, her sword hand trembling. She steadied it with her other hand. I will take your words to heart, she vowed. Kim simply rolled his shoulder, a smirk on his face. Again, he commanded. Don't stop now. Her eyes blazed with resolve as she charged, their blades crossing again in a shower of sparks. She threw another powerful strike, but he vanished from its path, her sword slamming into the floor and shattering the tile. Kim stood tall, looking down with unshakable confidence as Aaron recovered her stance. She raised her sword once more, her mind clear. This is exactly as I expected, she thought. She lunged forward, realizing with a jolt that thanks to this brutal training, she was on another level now. She unleashed a relentless flurry of attacks, but he parried every single blow with masterful ease. Their swords locked once more, and Kim looked her straight in the eye, his gaze piercing and confident. By the time they finished, evening had fallen over the Valhalla building. Aaron stood exhausted on the scarred training floor, her entire body shaking from the effort. Kim tossed his head back casually. It's been an hour, he said. Let's leave it at that. Aaron could only agree before collapsing to the floor, desperately trying to catch her breath. As he put away his weapon, she realized her swordsmanship had evolved beyond her wildest dreams. This was incomparable to the novice who fought during the entrance ceremony. And yet, even with all this progress, she still couldn't land a single hit on him. Wiping away her sweat, she called out his name. He turned to her questioningly. She stood before him, weapon in hand, and asked, Will you spar with me again? Kim put a hand to his chin, feigning thought. I don't know, he replied. Inwardly, however, he knew this training was incredibly useful. Teaching her was fun. She possessed a rare talent. He'd sensed it during the entrance ceremony. She was deeply familiar with the art of the sword. She used a breathing technique, he noted, but it was a style that felt different. He smiled. In any case, their training helped him unwind. If this were 300 years ago, a talent like hers would have been worthy of becoming his own disciple. But unfortunately, that was no longer possible. Aaron looked at him, awaiting his answer. A mischievous glint appeared in Kim's eyes as he decided to play a small joke. I don't want to, he said flatly. To his surprise, Aaron's expression didn't falter. I understand, he asked in desperation. You're really giving up that quickly. She looked at him and replied, You are absolutely right. Her gaze was sincere. She knew that if she just followed Kim's words, she would undoubtedly grow even stronger. Kim stared back, repeating her cryptic words. He couldn't grasp what she meant. That he was right. Then he announced that their session was over for the day, and Aaron declared they wouldn't see each other again. 2 weeks passed in an instant. We find ourselves in the Valhalla Stadium, packed with countless people. Soan stood near the crowd, gripping her sword. My first time here since the entrance ceremony, she muttered. Senak, lost in the sea of faces, wondered aloud if every single freshman was truly gathered here. He never imagined there would be so many. Aaron stood apart, her gaze fixed forward, radiating pure confidence. Kim, with his hands buried in his pockets, coolly scanned the crowd. Why is everyone here? He wondered. B reminded him. The homeroom teacher explained this 2 weeks ago. What exactly happened back then? He asked. Suddenly, a commanding voice echoed across the stadium. Attention! It was Lee, standing beside Leong and Lilia with an air of absolute authority. I will now explain the Valhalla midterm examinations, he announced. The students fell silent, hanging on his every word. This semester's practical assessment is a dungeon attack. The moment he spoke, the very ground began to shake, stunning everyone. Lee continued, You won't all be teaming up to enter some artificial training ground. Then, a massive structure with a single door materialized. Dungeons began appearing all around the students, who were packed tightly together. Lee observed them. You are free to form any team you wish. Our recommendation is a party of 8, but you can choose to increase or decrease that number. Kim just watched, silently absorbing every detail. Lee clarified the rules. You will be graded solely on your contribution level during the dungeon raid, and the disqualification criteria are simple. A holographic system window appeared, displaying a timer 5 hours. Lee's gaze hardened. Fail to clear the dungeon in the allotted time, and you will be eliminated from this exam. Soan was shocked to hear the next part. The dungeon's difficulty was set to F rank. With a confident smirk, Lee declared, The exam begins now. And the countdown started. The teachers watched as the students instantly fell into chaos, desperately scrambling to find a team. Shouts echoed everywhere. Need a healer? Join our party. Leong looked at Lee, remarking, Just as you expected. They're all fired up, Lee agreed. But then his expression shifted to surprise. Wait, what is this? Someone extended a hand. Our dealer and tank aren't enough. We need more firepower. A student rushed forward. I can do it, he offered. A dealer, the core damage dealer of any party. Someone considered him for a moment. She knew she didn't need someone stronger than her. For an F-rank dungeon, 5 hours was more than enough time for 8 people. She glanced at the student and his companion. Teamwork was the key. It was clear to her that a balanced group of 6 could easily handle this. The objective was simple. Show off their individual abilities. She waved her hand forward, shouting, Let's go. Lee watched it all unfold, thinking to himself that it was just as he'd foreseen. Students from influential families understood the true nature of this test, but for the others, it wasn't so simple. He watched the massive crowd of students swarm the dungeon entrances. Some were rushing in with parties of 20, while others stuck to the recommended 8-person groups. He knew what would happen next. If a team wasn't properly balanced, infighting and endless disputes were inevitable. It was a common, fatal mistake. Liang turned to Lee, who noted that in about 30 minutes, every student would be inside. Let's prepare to start tallying their points, he suggested, amid the chaos. Kim stood alone on the field. He watched everyone scatter and vanish into the dungeons. He casually glanced aside, wondering if those who entered first received bonus points. Aaron also remained behind. While Napoli was busy overseeing the other students, Kim slowly approached Aaron. You haven't gone in yet either, he asked. Almost everyone's inside already. What's your plan? Aaron simply looked at him. I'll do as you said. Kim paused, his hands still in his pockets. a flicker of shock on his face. He couldn't figure her out. Was she still trying to follow his advice from their last training session? He met her gaze. "I'm going in alone. So you should have gone already." Kim closed his eyes and began walking forward. Aaron watched his back. "So you're really going to solo it?" Kim's reply was nonchalant. "It doesn't look that hard." Aaron silently watched him go, the first person to enter the dungeon alone. In the back, students began to whisper. "Isn't that Choi Aaron?" one asked. Another confirmed. "It's definitely her." But why is she? He wasn't sure why she stood alone, wondering if she truly had no team. A student approached with a friendly smile. "Aren't you Choi Aaron?" he asked. Aaron glanced at him, surprised. The student gestured to his own group. "If you don't have a team," he offered, "why not join us? We need one more person." There were exactly 7 of them, with her. They'd be a full party of 8. Aaron looked over, but shook her head with an apology. "I'm going to challenge this dungeon solo," she declared, turning toward the looming entrance and pushing the heavy doors. The student's hand shot out in disbelief. "Are you crazy? That's instant disqualification." But Aaron, staring straight ahead, simply replied, "I can do this. Kim said it wasn't that difficult." "What are you talking about?" he stammered. But it was too late. The massive doors slammed shut behind her. In the observation room, far from the empty, silent stadium of pillars, the faculty watched intently. Screens lit up the room, displaying students battling their way through the dungeon against swarms of monsters. Instructor Lian stood silently with a clipboard, his eyes fixed on the system feed where a snarling goblin faced a student team. At the vanguard was Yoon Kain, sword held steady, having already scored 2 points. Cowering nearby, clutching her backpack in fear, was BEDI, who had somehow earned 3 points. And standing with an air of pure confidence was Yoon Jinsu, with a score of 1 point. Instructor Lee watched them all, his gaze sharp. Lian observed him, noting how his finger traced the student's movements on the screen. Lian thought to himself that Lee's standards were just as harsh as he'd expected. It was a brutal evaluation. Yet, his assessments were shockingly fast and accurate, without a single mistake. Lee stood, arm extended, absorbing all the data. Back in his soldiering days, they called Instructor Lee the Sweep Master, a legendary warrior, with a staggering 99% dungeon clearing rate. That's why, Lian mused, he grasps the essence of a dungeon raid better than anyone. It was this deep understanding that allowed him to award points with such precision. As he watched Lee methodically track the students, Lian knew this was a man worthy of absolute respect. Lee's internal monologue was one of approval. It was, all in all, a very good year. He observed the students from noble bloodlines, thinking that the heirs of the 5 great families were performing admirably. Among them, one shone particularly bright. His eyes locked onto the screen showing Soeon, her hand outstretched as she barked out commands. "Tank, hold the front line." Her team stood firm as she directed the defense. "Archers," she yelled. "Eliminate any who attack from the sides." At her word, goblins swung their clubs and charged forward. The frontliners braced, their shields ready for impact. Soeon clenched her fist, her voice ringing with authority. "The front line must not fall, archers. Fire." A volley of arrows rained down upon the goblins. The shafts found their marks, wounding the creatures. In that moment, Soeon herself burst forward, a blur of motion. Her sword sliced through the air, felling a goblin in a single, clean strike. Its body fell, dissolving into particles of blue light. Lee watched it all unfold on the monitor. A single thought in his mind, magnificent. He could see her masterful strategy. She wasn't just clearing the dungeon, she was commanding it. She had assigned perfect roles, made moves guaranteed to earn points, and expertly guided her team toward a flawless victory. He raised his index finger, tapping thoughtfully on the system screen. As he analyzed Soeon's performance, he knew that with her talent, it was only a matter of time, before she rose to claim the top spot. Then, he recalled Kim's first battle, where he had so easily overwhelmed her. If his reputation hadn't been unjustly tarnished during the entrance ceremony, he typed Kim's name and hit search. "Let's see how he's doing," Lee murmured. But the system panel returned an unexpected message. Nothing found. Lee stared in surprise. How could that be? This was a master search engine that could locate any student in the academy. He scanned the system screen again, trying to figure out what went wrong. Then, his eyes caught it. A different tab. Midterm exam. Artificial dungeon list. He looked at the list, and saw at rank number 1. Kim. Clear time, 23 minutes and 32 seconds. The instructor froze. He had already cleared the dungeon. Alone without a team. But what truly shattered his composure was the clear time. He stared at it, utterly dumbfounded. He studied the data again and again. No matter how impressive Kim had been at the ceremony, this was on another level entirely, something a 17-year-old high schooler could even do. He analyzed it all, realizing what he needed to do. He had to watch the footage of his own dungeon clear. He pulled up the video of himself and pressed play. There he stood, sword held ready, facing down a horde of goblins whose eyes burned with malice. He closed his eyes, taking a single breath to steady himself. And then, he exploded forward. The goblins shrieked, charging to meet him. But Kim was already a blur of motion, a faint smile on his lips. A single punch tore through two goblins, shattering them into dust as they collapsed to the floor. With that same casual smile, he parried their frantic attacks, remarking on how much he enjoyed this. He loved the feeling of shattering these stone goblins. Then, his face turned serious as two larger ones appeared. They towered over him, swinging their massive clubs, a sneer on their faces as they attacked. But their crushing blows met only empty air. In the blink of an eye, Kim had vanished from his spot. He reappeared above them, his blade descending in a flawless arc to cut down the unsuspecting beasts. Watching the feed, Lee and the others had only one thought: this wasn't a fight. It was a slaughter. And then, a new figure stepped forward. A colossal, ironclad monster that defied all reason. Lee watched, his mind racing. It was a golem, one designed specifically for the midterm exam. He knew its stats had been boosted to equal the power of 8 students combined. The golem swung its mighty arm to crush him, but Kim simply met the attack with a confident smile, his own blade lunging forward. A flash of crimson light erupted from his sword. The golem's head slid from its shoulders as its body split apart. Lee shut his eyes, unable to believe it. He'd cut down that monster with absolute ease. When he looked again, he knew. First place in this exam had already been decided. Soon after, battered and exhausted students began stumbling out from the dungeon's entrance. Others followed, their faces alight with the joy of simply having cleared the dungeon and survived. A group led by Soyeon emerged, her gaze locked forward. Then came Sak's team, and finally, Aaron. The midterms were officially over. In the staff room, Leanne reviewed the results on a clipboard. Kim was in first place. He was followed by Aaron, Soyeon, and Sinak. Legan stared at the results in stunned silence as he approached Lee. "The final rankings are out," he said. Lee looked over the list. "We've got some unexpected results," Leon confirmed. Kim took first place. Closing his eyes, Lee processed the information. "That is quite the surprise." Leon silently recalled Kim's absolute dominance. "I truly didn't expect him to claim the #1 rank," Lee admitted. "No one could have predicted this. He cleared the entire dungeon solo, without suffering a single injury. It's unheard of." Lee stared off into the distance. When a talent like him enters the industry, Korea might reclaim the title of the only one. Leanne stood before him, extending his hand. "Hold on, isn't that the title reserved for the world's strongest contractor?" Lee smirked. "You're thinking correctly. It's just been far too long since a true genius has appeared among us." Leanne listened quietly, his eyes drifting back to the tablet in his hands. "However," he began, "the biggest surprise from this second exam was someone else entirely." Lee's expression turned serious. "You're talking about student Choi Aaron." Legan glanced at the rankings again. The fact that Aaron had surpassed Soyeon and claimed second place was almost unbelievable. "We never thought Aaron could handle a dungeon alone, either," Lee confessed. Yet she did, with astonishing speed. She took some damage, certainly, but she still cleared it and seized second place. Leon stared at Lee, holding his clipboard tightly as he absorbed the analysis. Lee continued, "I always knew Aaron was a quiet and hardworking student, but I never thought she was this type of person. The type of person who could conquer a high-level dungeon, completely on her own. If this exam was focused on teamwork," he concluded, "Soyeon would have undoubtedly scored higher. But since it was focused solely on individual contribution, Kim and Aaron's results were phenomenal." Lee's gaze hardened. "There is one thing, however, I would not recommend their methods to my students." Legan, tablet in hand, agreed with a solemn nod. What they accomplished is not something ordinary students could ever hope to repeat. He was certain of it. He remembered Aaron from when she led the Cheon Guild. She had the aura of a young master who only knew the way of the sword. But he couldn't fathom what led her to challenge the dungeons alone. His gaze fell, and he realized the reason was Kim Jin-woo. Closing his eyes, he pressed a hand to his head. "This can't be happening," he muttered, trying to dismiss the thought. He just needed some rest. The sunset painted the spires of Valhalla in hues of fire. The very next day, a crowd of students gathered before a large blackboard, buzzing with anticipation. The final results were posted, and at the top were 2 names, Kim and Aaron. Raquel and Yuri stood off to the side, his face contorted with pure rage. He spun on Yuri, his voice low and dangerous. "Is D in Korea right now?" he demanded. Yuri confirmed it was true, with a vicious glint in his eyes. Raquel told her to contact him immediately. "We're leaving," he declared. The scene shifts to Seoul, where a massive skyscraper pierces the clouds. We see Raquel and Yuri stride into the building as subordinates bow their heads. A smooth voice suddenly calls out, "Brother?" It was D, the heir of Endrick. He was lounging at a table, dressed in a pristine white suit with rings on every finger. Raquel sat across from him as Yuri stood at attention. A lavish meal was served. D sliced into a piece of steak, devouring it with a primal hunger as Raquel watched in cold silence. After dessert, D finally spoke. His cutlery paused midair as he looked up. "So, the boy you want me to take care of is Kim Jin-woo." D asked who he was. Raquel smirked, a look of pure disdain on his face. "He's nothing special, just a brainless freshman." D closed his eyes, savoring his meal while Raquel explained his pathetic goal. "Kim has greatly disappointed me," Raquel said. "His humble origins are an insult. I want you to deal with him." D's eyes narrowed. "You mean kill him?" A cruel smile spread across Raquel's face. "That decision is entirely up to you." D pushed himself away from the table and stood. "This is different from our last arrangement. You'll need to prepare the stage." Raquel's eyes sharpened. "What does that mean?" D extended his index finger, pointing it directly at Yuri, who was standing beside him. "Because of this woman," D hissed. "The last job got messy. I had a huge fight with the Felix family." Yuri began to tremble, her gaze fixed on the floor. "Perhaps because the Felix family is small," D mused. "I couldn't just eliminate everyone. The rumors spread too far." He casually resumed eating his dessert. "The people in Valhalla are a different breed," he continued. "No matter how many times I've operated there, it's never easy to go in and create the perfect mess." Raquel watched D, a flicker of understanding in his gaze. "I see." Behind him, Yuri stood frozen in terror, but Raquel simply smiled. "I will do everything possible to prepare the ground for you. You don't have to worry about a thing." A satisfied grin spread across D's face. "Excellent," he purred. "Just be sure to prepare a handsome reward for my troubles." A week later, we see Kim again. He was holding an official statement, walking down the hall and talking to Barch. "Is that a permit to go outside again?" Barch asked. "Exactly," Kim confirmed. Barch tilted his head. "Weren't you just out recently?" "That's true," Kim replied, his eyes focused ahead. "But I have to go out again." He continued down the corridor. Barch remembered something. "I heard they're giving an extra exit permit for passing the exam." "That's right," Kim said, his voice firm. "I can't let this opportunity pass me by. I need to find my notes." Barch watched him leave. "Where are you headed?" The scene cuts to a building in Suwon. Kim, wearing a hood, navigated through the woods, his phone lighting his way. "The place should be right around here," he muttered. Just as he looked down at his phone, a voice cut through the silence. Kim confidently looked up and saw D standing before him, a malicious look on his face. With a sinister smile, he asked, "Well, how have you been?"